Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Hope you're having a great day, and hopefully, the time that we may spend together will just make it even better. Welcome back to Hot Mic. Hot Mic is a podcast where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm your moderator, Nate the Barbarian, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by Tarris Horton, Phil Heimlich, and Kevin Aldridge, as always. Gentlemen, good afternoon. And how are
Good
you today? Welcome
afternoon.
back.
Good
How is everybody?
afternoon.
Everybody good?
Feeling great. Feel
Okay.
great. Glad to be here.
All right. Now, our last couple of shows have been heated. Last Friday was heated. I expect nothing different today. We invite the audience to chime in the comment section. Let us know if you have questions or comments. I'll put them on the screen in the chat. So it's kind of like a running dialogue of what people are saying in the comments. But we're just going to get straight into it. There's so many things going on. And, there's one topic that I was remiss in my duties to put it in there that everyone's been talking about. And that is what's going on in terms of California. Of course, they've been devastated with the forest fires, and there's been a lot of politicizations about it from the Trump administration, a lot of conservative media outlets. And I just want to get your opinion real quick about what do you think about what you see and how this is being dealt with, how this is being politicized.
Well, I'll go first. I mean, first of all, obviously, hearts, thoughts, and prayers go out to everybody who's dealing with that devastation. And I'm always loath to try to politicize, these sorts of things. I mean, we had similar conversations when the hurricanes came through this past summer and hit some different areas. I think there's time for. I think there's a time for. Careful evaluation of how things are handled or the way in which we should change systems or do things better. But I never think those times are in the midst of dealing with an emergency, right? I mean, I think we can all take a look at situations and say, hey, should we have been doing this? Could we do this better? I think that's smart to do those sorts of analysis whenever you have, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made situation, what have you, that it always makes sense to take a look at those things. But to try to politicize things in the midst of things when our first responders are trying to deal with it, elected officials are trying to respond, people are losing their homes, I just think that's always a bad time to try to make politics out of things. Let's get through it. Let's deal with it. Let's get people back on their feet. And then if you want to, have the political conversations about who's to blame or who should have been doing what, okay, let's do it then. But there's an appropriate time for that, and that's not now.
Well, it makes me sick to see politicians telling California that it's your fault, or like Trump did, or saying, well, if you're going to get any federal money, you got to make some changes, or it makes some changes. I heard something, maybe been Colbert or somebody last night, who quoted, Tommy Tuberville, the ex-losing UC coach, who now somehow is the senator from Alabama. Whoever was talking about that Alabama has like almost the worst ratings of their education system, almost anybody in the country. And they were saying, okay, Tommy, the next time there's a hurricane like that went through before in Alabama, we're going to have to hold back on that till you get your education standards up. And so I thought that was a fitting response. But people who would use this in any way for political gain, that just makes me sick.
I'll echo all three of you guys about it's not fair to use it for political gain, but that's the country we live in. For everything is turned political. I mean, they turn everything political, as you've seen what they try to blank. I'm proud of you, Kevin, for not mentioning Donald Trump. I thought you were going to be like, you were going to mention Trump first, but it was Phil who mentioned Trump. But I don't think Trump has anything to do with the situation in California.
Huh?
Well, he blamed Tarris. He blamed the governor for it, which is totally ridiculous. So he does have something to do with it.
Well, in his defense, and I'm gonna finish and I'll go back to what you're saying. I believe that this is biblical prophecy. If you believe in Bible, it's like as I do. I believe this is like a biblical prophecy. If you look at Hollywood and the things that it's done, if you look at the trafficking and the just all of the filth that has come out of Hollywood. It's just like in Isaiah 66 and 15, they fire. And when you're listening to these people talk on the news, you're like, it's like fire and brimstones is just coming, and the winds are just going, and fire's going everywhere. And if you look at the Bible, it says the same thing. But who knows?
Tarris, if I could just quick, are you saying kind of like Pat Robertson used to say? I think I got him right. Maybe Paul or one of those guys used to say, well, the reason we had all this destruction and fires and tornadoes was because we allow gay marriage. I mean, that was that the same point you're making.
That's a reach. That for you, Phil, that was a reach. I wouldn't even go there. I don't agree with any of that, what you just said. I said that it's biblical prophecy. And if you look at Bible verses, and you study things like I do, and you believe in things like I do, it's ammunition to push my agenda of get right, church, and let's go home. You know what I'm saying? That type of mentality. But how they're politicizing it, they politicize everything. They politicize the fact
that doesn't make it right.
I didn't say it made it right, but everybody, you know what I'm going to deal with the things that how I feel what's right. And like I said, I feel it's right for me to push the agenda of look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at all these things that have happened in California with the child trafficking, with all the nastiness, the Diddy trial, all the Diddy part, all the stuff. And I'm involved in the music industry, and I thank God. My sister used to tell me all the time, Troy, don't sell your soul to the devil. And I never knew what she meant until I got older. And going and being around Hollywood and being around all those circles, I mean, I'm like, burn Hollywood, burn, just like Chuck D said. But the politicizing part of it, what better chance for the right to politicize something when they want to dismantle California? They want to dismantle it. They want to dismantle the democratic oligarch system that goes on in California. So why not damage it? And while it's down, kick them. That's politics.
Yeah, I mean, Tarris just spoke some truth there at the end. I mean, listen, I agree with the sentiment that this is the wrong time and the wrong place to be politicizing it. But this is the world we live in. And I've come to the conclusion that this red state, blue state thing is not going away. The Civil War has already started, and it was started by the Republicans, and they get a benefit out of dividing us, red state, blue state. My fear is that a lot of people, a lot of Americans are going to get hurt because people are playing games, politicizing it, thinking that it's going to help them. Tarris is correct. Part of the reason why there's so much hate and there's so many critiques about California is pure politics. Number one, California is a blue state. And so they want to try to make the point that the Democrats and the people in blue states and the leaders are just incompetent, which is what they've said.
So what they're doing essentially, Nathan, is what Mitch McConnell and all the leaders in my party in Congress, basically they're putting party before country. That's what they're doing.
They're putting party before country. And then the other thing is that Gavin Newsom and a lot of people's checklist is high on the list as a prospect for running for president in 2028. MAGA and Republicans are thinking down the line.
Put Gavin Newsom up.
They are always closing. It's always politics 24/7. They never sleep. They never stop. And while many of them are not a part of the larger plot and really are victims of it, they are still pawns in the game. And this is a vicious onslaught that I just fear at some point. I hope it doesn't happen. All of this disinformation and propaganda is going to lead, again, like we saw with COVID, when Trump was in office, is going to lead to a lot of Americans losing their lives. The other thing is that I want people to understand, it's not about if the Civil War, it's already here, and it's taking place on social media. Already, whether you like it or not, MAGA and Republicans have declared war. So people have to figure out what you're going to do.
Well, I think there's probably maybe a little bit too simplistic way of looking at it. I mean, look, you guys are saying a lot of things that are true, and it is true. This is the world that we live in, but I always believe that the world is what we make it. And I think that in terms of, those of us who believe in the things that we're talking about here, about what is appropriate, have to stand up and have to speak on this and not condone it when our leaders do things like this. Like aid for people who are suffering should not be contingent upon a political wish list from a candidate. Hey, you do this, I'll give you relief. That's just not good and decent. I don't care what party that you're a part of. Now, Donald Trump and the Republicans have chosen to try to use that as a hammer in cases where they've been empowered to say, hey, you need to do this or fall in line, or we're not going to send you education dollars. We're not going to send you this, that, or the other. I don't ever think that, putting people's lives, their livelihood, on the bargaining table is the way that our politicians should work. And I think shame on us as voters and citizens if we stand for that and allow them to do that. We need to stand and say, hey, there are just some things that are out of bounds. Yes, politics is a rough and tumble sport. It can be a rough and ugly game at sometimes, but there are certain lines that we should not cross. I think the unfortunate thing in our country is now you've got some politicians who are crossing lines that before there was a general understanding of statesmanship and politics, that there are lines that we don't cross. There are no lines anymore. And part of the reason why that's the case is we, the people, are allowing that to be the case. And we need to stand up, whether you're Republican or Democrat. When we see folks on our side doing things like this, we got to stand up and say, hey, we want to win. We want our policies, but there's some lines we're not willing to cross to win. And it seems like these days there's no line that folks are not willing to cross to win.
But be specific here. Like, it's not, it's the Republicans.
Can I
Let's call
chime
it
in
what
on
it
this
is.
one?
This is very simple. These are Republicans that are crossing a line. They have rewritten the boundaries. And it is that simple. It's for them, it is as simple as red state, blue state, Donald Trump versus everybody else. It's just that simple. And I just fear that, like, you got this guy, what is his name? From
Warren
Ohio.
Davidson.
He's a
Warren Davidson.
Warren Davidson. Yeah, this guy's saying let's withhold funds. You're going to see more of that, not less.
But he's taking some
more
criticism behind that, Nathan, and that's what I mean. There have been some people who have been vocal, and he said that. He did say that, but he has not. He has been taken to task by a lot of people over those comments. And that's what I mean. That's the type of thing that has to happen and has to happen routinely. Now, I'm sure Phil has a perspective on this because he ran against Warren Davidson. So I'll be curious to see what Phil's thoughts are on that.
Well, my response is that Warren Davidson, like Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and a host of others, are a product of gerrymandering. Okay? They are a product of being in a district where he is, where I like to say, if John F. Kennedy came back from the dead, he could win as a Democrat. Okay? So a guy like him can say crazy stuff, can go, wants to play as far to the right, and I hate to even say right because I don't consider conservative, but play as far to the the base, if you will, knowing he has no threat of being challenged in the general election. This is the same guy, by the way, who voted to overturn the election after the riot on January 6, 2021. So that's why I ran against him in the primary. And until we get gerrymandering eliminated, which unfortunately issue 1 was voted down, until we get that eliminated, the system is going to continue to produce extremists like him and like the others I named.
Right. And see, he might take some heat, and I don't doubt that.
He doesn't care. He's got no competition. He
might take some heat, but he doesn't care because he knows that in his district, he's going to ride it out. As long as he stays close to Trump and he stays accurate to the party and whatever the messaging is of the moment and doesn't stray too far from that, he can say whatever he wants to say.
Except disagree with Trump. If
whatsoever.
He goes up against Trump, then he gets primaried. But other than
then
that,
he gets primaried.
You're right. He can say anything, do anything, as long as the base likes it.
Right. And you made this point again. I think you should keep making that point over and over again, just about the danger of gerrymandering in our states and how that produces what we see in Congress. There is definitely a connection there. And I don't think that working class people are benefiting from that at all.
I have to agree with both Phil and Kevin on this one with the gerrymander statement and I can you agree. The Republicans are doing this, but it's because of the party switch that happened, like with Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff. Because this is the same stuff that they're doing. I'm seeing in the Republican Party is how, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat. How the Jim Crow was in the Democratic side in the beginning before the party switch. How they would have these certain laws and these unspoken things. It's working the same way in the Republican Party now. But there are people who, like myself, who will speak out against it whenever I do see it. But Kevin is absolutely correct when he said that there's things that we have to call it out on both sides. And right now, the Republicans are in power. It's going to take people like myself and to call that out whenever you see it.
Yeah. It's a feeding frenzy online. I've been sort of battling, for lack of a better term, with some of these folks and trying to figure out where they're coming from. I mean, it's nonstop. It's nonstop BS. It's nonstop BS. And, Gavin Newsom went so far as to actually creating a website called California Fire Facts, because there was so much disinformation being put out there. And also amplified on X by Elon Musk.
If you guys still go after, if you guys still put Gavin Newsom up as your presidential candidate in 2028 after this, similar to New Jersey, whenever the New Jersey thing happened when Chris Christie was.
Oh, there's no comparison. That thing was outright corrupt. Where he cut off the lanes to punish some mayor of some little town that didn't
let me finish my thought.
Gavin Newsom had nothing to do with those fires. So blaming him, I'm not a huge fan of this, but blaming him is just absolutely wrong. And
Bill, I never blamed him. I never blamed him. I made a correlation between the demise of Chris Christie's political career after that hurricane in New Jersey. He was trending. He could have been the Republican. He was trending. And now I'm saying, if you put him down, this is the same situation. This is the same situation where there's a natural disaster that happened in a governor's state who has a potential prime.
The hurricane did not hurt Chris Christie. What hurt Chris Christie was that Bridgegate thing. That's what really hurt him.
Look,
when the hurricane happened and Chris Christie was walking around New Jersey just like, oh my God, that's when his political career went. He was not presidential after that situation. To me personally.
Yeah, what I would say on that point what I would say on Tarris's point on that is, he's right from the standpoint of, if Newsom winds up being in a general election, this is something that folks will likely try to refer back to make him look incompetent or incapable of handling big situations. But I'll say this: we're 4 years away from any. We haven't even gotten the new president in the office yet, so I think it's fairly premature to be talking about what folks are going to be talking about and focusing on 4 years from now. I mean, hell, we seem to have forgotten and reelected a guy who's responsible for millions of deaths in his bungling of COVID. So I doubt very seriously that the American attention span to some wildfires that are taking place in 2025 will be relevant and at top of mind in people's minds in 2028. So, it makes for good political conversation and jockeying right now, but in 4 years there'll be something else we'll be talking about.
I mean, I think what you're saying is right about the 4 years, and let's wait and see. But I also believe that if Gavin Newsom, and now Donald Trump is calling him Gavin Newscum, and I'm battling with people on Facebook that's in the Cincinnati area, I guess they're Republicans, and they're regurgitating that name back to me. It's already stuck. If Gavin Newsom runs in 4 years, this will come up. And they will use it to show he's incompetent. The Republican Party is very good at doing this. They did the same thing with Hillary Clinton with Benghazi. They're very good about this. And there's something about the electorate or parts of the country that wants to believe this. They get something out of it. I don't think it's fair. I agree with Phil. Gavin Newsom has been doing his best. He's been all over TV. He's been trying to be transparent. It's called a fire. And, there's some national implications in terms of Republicans who voted against a bill that would have put about $75 million for some firefighting techniques that they're not getting blamed with whatsoever. And again, this red state, blue state thing is not going anywhere. It's not.
Can we drop the red state, blue state, and then talk about what the fire chief said? The fire chief said that if you could have had 26,000 fire trucks there, and they wouldn't have been able to stop this blaze. So it's not political. This was something. This is of active nature. This is a. So
I know.
So what you're right. I don't even know why I said that, because This
So
is
You just made my
emphasis
point.
is not, and you got to understand what the conversation is or what the quote unquote politics is. It's not so much as saying that, hey, look, this is a natural disaster. There's nothing that Gavin Newsom or anybody could have done to prevent it. What is being talked about is the handling of it. What preventative things could have been done ahead of time. The whole conversations about, I think Warren Davidson's whole argument was, if there had been better forestation management or deforestation, that you wouldn't have things to the extent. I mean, a lot of that stuff is crap, but that's the political nature of it. So it's not so much, oh, could somebody have done something to prevent an act of God, so to speak, or an act of nature, but it's how you handle it. I think most people would argue that COVID was not Donald Trump's fault. He didn't create it. It landed in his lap. But the criticism of him was how he handled it. So, if it's fair in that instance, people will make a political issue out of Newsom's handling of these wildfires, and he will be judged on that in terms of.
They're also, I don't know if you guys saw this, but the people, again, I regret, in my party are blaming, if somehow are finding a connection between this fire and the sexual preferences of certain people. Okay, they're because one of the female fire chiefs around in one of those communities is gay. They're saying, oh, this is because of DEI. I'm not a big DEI supporter, but that is pure BS, and it's disgusting that people, again, would use. I mean, I don't know people. I don't know people personally who've suffered, but I have a friend who's been setting up a GoFundMe fund for her friend who lost everything, and it's so tragic and so sad that anybody. I mean, can't you just say hopes and prayers and not get in the dirt? Take advantage of a terrible situation.
But that comes back to leadership, Phil. And, this has been my argument from day one. And again, I've said my biggest criticism of Trump in this Trump era is what they've unleashed in terms of public discourse, negative public discourse, foolishness, recklessness. All of that has become a part of the discourse now, where we can't even have substantive conversations about serious issues because of what you just highlighted. People want to push their agendas. So if I'm anti-LGBTQ, if I'm anti-transgender, and I find out the fire chief in this situation is that, and I want to push that agenda, I'm going to bring that up, if for no other reason than, I know it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on, but if I can throw shade on those people, or if I can throw shade and say, see, this is why DEI doesn't work, because now you've got an incompetent fire chief, who's only there because they're a lesbian, or because they're a gay man, or because they're transgender. It all fits into this puzzle of what these folks are trying to piece together to explain why America is broken from their point of view. So there's a method to the madness. It's not just being mean-spirited or dirty for the sake of being it. There's an agenda behind it. And I think smart thinking people, who look at it, see it for what it is. But there are a lot of people who are not that savvy and who aren't picking up on those cues and are kind of following.
And I think another thing that goes with that is what people listen to for news. First of all, I've told like a large percentage of Americans, maybe a majority, get theirs from social media, which in my opinion is totally foolish. But the other thing is there is a huge percentage, whatever percentage of this population that I think Kevin just kind of alluded to, that they only listen to Fox News or Newsback. They only listen to what they want to hear. And those stations in turn, those networks in turn, give them what they want to hear so they can bring in advertising dollars. I'm dating myself here, but I can remember, maybe some of you can, when we only had 3 stations, okay? And basically the news was, I don't know, I would say pretty balanced. It wasn't trying to push some kind of philosophy or something. You had Frank Reynolds and David Brinkley, Walter Cronkite. And in that sense, people kind of had to listen to what's going on, and as opposed to only being fed a menu of stuff that they believe in. So I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, it's part of the problem for sure. And back to what we were talking about, and the point you were making, Kevin, is like I seen some people posting like it looked like it was AI images, but like there's a fire and a house burning in the background, and in the foreground there's a fire hydrant that's painted a rainbow, and people are like, "See, they're so caught up with woke policies and DEI that they can't even put water in the hydrants." And I'm thinking to myself, this makes sense to you? Thousands, tens of thousands of clicks and interactions on social media. And to what Phil was saying, people ingesting that and taking it in like it's the gospel, like this is news, like, yeah, it confirms my fears. DEI is the real problem. They're so caught up with DEI. I'm thinking, dude, how does this even compute? But again, in the world we live in, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really seem to matter.
I think you got to look at, and I study this stuff and I look at it, and one of the powerful things about fake news, I'm talking about actual real fake news that where somebody might take a grain of something that's true and then pile on top of it a whole bunch of fictitious things, and then it gets shared broadly, is one of the key tenets of fake news is that it presses buttons, it hits emotional topics and things that draw a visceral reaction from people, and that's where you get people who feel inclined to comment or who feel inclined to share or do that. Most of those things are things that you see that you have some sort of emotional reaction to, and so you comment on it because you feel like, man, I got to say something on this when I see it. And that is what fake news, misinformation, all of that stuff does. So what you've got to ask yourself as a consumer of this product, when you feel yourself getting animated, that ought to be the first sign for you that you need to slow down, right? Like review what you say, check your source, try to see who's giving me this information. What is their agenda before I kind of fly off, because that's how I process information. Whenever I feel like I'm getting stirred up, it's like, okay, that's my first red flag that I need to slow down and I need to check this. First of all, who is putting this out there? Exactly. Secondly, what is their agenda? How do they know what they know? Because we take a whole lot of stuff off of social media right now without questioning it, at any rate where it comes from. And I think I've said this on previous programs. It's like people want to question the mainstream media ad nauseum, right? They want to question everything we do, challenge us on everything that we do, challenge our agenda, our point of view, our bias. Yet they get on social media and they read things. They have no clue where it's coming from. They have no clue of anybody's training, any agenda, anything, and they swallow it whole. And I just have to ask myself, what is it about us as individuals that because we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, that we will swallow whole information that we have no idea where it comes from? But the reason why we do is because that stuff is good at pushing emotional buttons that does something inside of us. So I think each person has to ask, like, what is going on with me? What am I angry about? What am I frustrated about? What am I mad about? Whatever that makes me susceptible to misinformation and disinformation. And that's what we all have to question.
Sometimes they do know where it's coming from. For example, look at the hundreds of thousands, millions of people that believe the 2020 election was rigged, leading to a large number who attacked the Capitol. Why? Why did they do that? Because Donald Trump told them. That's all. Trump told them, and that's who they listen to. And because they're listening to like pro-Trump TV stations, they're not going to hear. They don't hear the truth. They just hear what he wants you to hear. And to me, this is what happens in an autocracy. This is what happens in a dictatorship. It's whatever the leader says, that's what we do.
What happens when the mainstream media gets it wrong? I mean, and I was patient. What happened when the mainstream media gets it wrong? And I'll give you an example. It'll probably take me about 45 seconds to go through this. My father was a Vietnam veteran, went to Vietnam. Agent Orange sprayed all over at Vietnam. So whenever he came back, all the military people were like, Agent Orange, Agent Orange. Mainstream media and the powers that be said Agent Orange was nothing to see, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Up until 1991, whenever they started saying, okay, Agent Orange was a thing. So they started retracting their story. And it took up till 2023 for them to pass and say, okay, Agent Orange was a real thing. I know we said that it wasn't a real thing back then because that was the information that we had. My dad has been staying true on Agent Orange since the beginning, telling me, telling my brothers, telling anybody who would listen. They were spraying that stuff over there. This, the honey. My dad's got recordings of him saying these things. Up until my dad died in 2024, up in 2023, we were able, because we were vigilant and we didn't listen to the mainstream media, we were able to compensate because of our vigilance.
Do I got a question?
Hold on. Let me finish. Let's go to January 6th when AP puts out a statement about we were talking about the National Guard last time. But anecdotally, I have a friend who is second in command at the National Guard, and my son is in the National Guard. My blood son in the National Guard. Also, a member who was stationed in Camp Lejeune whenever there was the Biden administration mishandled the troops being left. Those were his direct brothers. So if AP puts out something, but then I have anecdotal experience from father, who my whole family trajectory has changed because we did not believe. And then my son is here saying one thing because he's a member of this. And then you are saying, oh, there's misinformation in AP. But what happens when the AP and the mainstream media gets it wrong?
Can I ask you a question?
Phil, can I address that? Can I address Phil? Go ahead and say what you want to say, as long as it doesn't take us off onto a different tangent.
No, it's exactly the same thing. I read the New York Times, the Wall Street, New York Times, Washington Post, and people. That's kind of exemplifies the sort of mainstream media. And I have a lot of friends that are always attacking it. But you know what I say? I ask them, and I'll ask you this question, Tarris. Who is accurate? What isn't accurate? Name an accurate news source. And you know what? They really never can. Okay? And that doesn't mean that the Times or the Post or Cincinnati Enquirer, especially, no, I'm teasing. It doesn't mean that they always get it right. Often you're right, they don't. But I will say this, for whether it's the Enquirer, the Times, whatever, they have pretty strict rules about fact checking and making sure they're not printing something that hasn't been verified by, for example, two sources. And so my question to you is, okay, if you don't trust the mainstream media for objectivity and for accuracy, give me a news source that you do trust.
So I take a lot of it collectively.
Tarris, before you get into that, can I jump in here and just kind of address what you guys were saying? You know, obviously as a working member of the media who's been in this for a long time, this is what I always tell people. That you ask, what does the media do when they get it wrong? They admit that they're wrong. They run a correction. We have standards in which we follow, where if any reporting that we initially put out turns out to be inaccurate, you know, we have rules, ethics, and policies that we follow that require us to put the correct information out there. So you're absolutely right. I tell people this all the time. When you talk about the mainstream media or media in general, I don't like to use the term truth, right? Truth is in some people's mind an absolute, and in other people's minds subjective. What I always say with the media, what you're dealing with is facts that can be proven or facts that can be verified. And sometimes that's not always 100% of the facts for various reasons. We have to rely on public documents that we can get that support certain things. We have to rely on interviews and quotes from people who are in a position to know or who are close to the situation. The problem with that is people lie. People don't tell you all of the information. People spin facts to support their agenda. And in the media, you're trying to sift through all of this and put out a report of information, of facts that we can verify, that we can prove, that we can put out there. Now, a lot of times there's a significant gap between that and what truth is. So you talk about what your dad experienced, and he's one guy who's experienced something. Not saying that his experience wasn't true, but outside of quoting him, you know, I think for a long time, the government wasn't going to make available any documentation or any research until years down the line that supported kind of maybe what your dad or others were saying. And when that came out, it was reported factually, like, yes, everything your dad and others were saying were absolutely true, because the media now has access to information that people were either keeping on lockdown, were not being truthful about when they were being asked about it, and then we're just reporting what we get. So I'll say this is that we're the most reliable source of information more often than not that you're going to get that's official. But we're not allowed to traffic in rumor and innuendo, things that we can't prove for a variety of different reasons. It would be unethical. We could get sued behind it. So you got to kind of understand how the media landscape works and why you're getting what you're getting or why you're not getting what you're getting. It's because we have a code of ethics and standards that we have to operate from that says that we can't do what the blogger on the internet can do, or the podcaster on the internet can do, which is just kind of come out and say anything without, really being concerned about what the ramifications of that are. We don't have that luxury. And so I think, like, when you say how you're consuming the media, and people are a lot of times critical of what we don't report, well, you aren't reporting that. Well, it's not because we wouldn't want to, or we don't think that there's any truth. We can't prove it. There's nothing that says that we've seen that we can go out and say that this is authentic, verifiable information that we can then go out and responsibly report on. And so that's the challenge that you face in this media landscape. But the shorter answer to that question is, when we get it wrong, we should admit that we got it wrong and put the right information out. And that's what good news sources do. How many of these other people out there who are feeding you bad information, when they get it wrong, come on and apologize on their podcast or whatever and say, you know what, that thing I told you last week wasn't accurate. They don't.
Not many.
Yeah. And we live in a time now where if the media, let's say mainstream media, gets it wrong, when they put out a statement, even that statement is used against them. It's just where we are. It's like people are like, oh, we told you, we got you. What else are you hiding from us? And it's really crazy. I mean, in my opinion, there's always been sort of an implied bargain or agreement between this country and its citizens, its working citizens. And that has been that if you work hard and you educate yourself and you're a good person and you do your overtime, then you're going to live the American dream. And that hasn't happened for a lot of reasons. A lot of that has to do with big money, big corporations, robber barons who've been able to jack the political system for their own benefit. But if you go back to Rush and probably even predating him, you've had these conservative voices who have taken that rightful frustration. Like, people have a right to be frustrated at the quality of their lives not meeting their expectations. But for the last 40 years, conservatives, man, they've been given these radio stations that now on Fox News, now on digital media, telling people that the culprit behind your dissatisfaction, the reason why America is changing is the left guys. It's the Inquirer. It's mainstream media. It's everybody. It's the other. It's all of the enemies. And now here we are in 2025, and it's metastasized. And I just don't know where we go from here without a lot of people being hurt before we can reconcile all of this. Like, I don't see MAGA ever abandoning what we're talking about. I don't see that energy ever going away. I don't see people ever, if they've got a problem with the Inquirer or so-called leftist media, if people look at the Inquirer that way, I don't see a point in the near future where people say, oh, well, Trump's not in office, I'm going to stop believing and thinking what I've been thinking and saying for the last 5
It'll just be
years.
obsolete, sir.
And I think it's very bad for our country. It's very bad.
It's going to take the right type of leadership, though. That's where I say, like, leadership is incredibly important. Yes, if we continue to have a generation of politicians, like Trump, or if you're on the other side, AOCs, whoever you want to villainize as the far extreme ends of each of the parties, if those continue to be the ones who are leading our country, you're right. We're always going to be in this perpetual divide, because the reality is most Americans live in the middle, not in the extremes. And I think until we get leaders who get back to that, who say, look, yeah, we do need to change. We do need to make opportunity. Look, I think one thing that we're in agreement on, by and large, I'm not going to say everybody, because there are fringe elements, anywhere. But I think by and large, most Americans believe this to be a land of opportunity and want to see opportunity for everybody. I think that's something that we can all agree on. We all want to be able to get a good job. We all want to live in safe neighborhoods. We all want our kids, to have, the best and brightest futures in front of them. Now, how we get there is, what oftentimes the disagreement comes to, but we got to stop living in these fringe elements. And that starts with leaders having the guts to say the things that we've said, to call out inappropriate things, to say we're not going to use dog whistles or vilify people for the causes of our problems. I think if any one of us on an individual level looked at our lives and we said, why am I not where I would like to be in a certain aspect of my life? I think we can all look at that and say that there's a certain degree of personal responsibility involved in that.
Do you guys remember when John McCain, one quick thing I'm going to say quick, when John McCain was running against Obama, he was at some event, I'm sure you guys remember this, and some woman said, Obama's not a real American, he's a Muslim or something. And to his credit, John McCain said, ma'am, I have disagreements with him, but no, he's an American. He's a loyal American. Can you imagine what Donald Trump would say to that? He'd say, yeah, right. That's exactly what. And
he just started being.
I didn't agree with John McCain and everything, but I think that was a great example of the kind of leadership that Kevin is talking about.
Well, Kevin's talking about.
Yeah, I bring that up.
Kevin's talking about leadership, and if you just watch the Zuckerberg, Joe Rogan interview.
We're going
okay, cool. Joe Rogan Zuckerberg was talking about how he felt intimidated and he was bullied and screamed and cursed at, seeking removal of Facebook content. That's the type of leadership. And now Zuckerberg is about to get full autonomy, or what do you call it? Full reign to run Facebook how he pleases, especially if they get rid of TikTok, but I don't think they will. He'll get to use Facebook as he pleases, and he went and kissed the ring. So you're talking about leadership, along with Elon Musk, along with True Social Network. They are about to, and I know you're talking about mainstream media. If the election of 2024 with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump didn't teach the mainstream media anything, it's music to a person like myself who's an independent creator's ears to say they still don't believe us. And it reminds me back whenever I first went to college at NKU, whenever I was advocating for TV, radio, broadcast communication, I would go to President Vitruba's office and say, print media is out. We need to quit wasting $100,000 on the Northerner and let's start moving toward digital media, getting Final Cut Pro and Avid and all these things. And they were like, no. And the print media people were like laughing at me. No, it's never going to happen. Now let's look at print media now and let's look at digital media. Let's look at the comparisons. So I agree with you, Kevin, with the leadership, and Donald Trump they're kissing the ring, and he's going to let them just unload on.
Yeah. Keep in mind about what you said about Mark Zuckerberg. Keep this in mind, that Trump publicly said that if Zuckerberg didn't do things his way, he was going to put him in jail. That's what he said. Okay. I didn't hear Mark Zuckerberg speak up and say, I'm being bullied, I'm being intimidated by a guy who's threatening to jail him. But you're right. Once he saw who had the power, he's going to kiss the ring. And I just think it's just disgusting, the fact that, by the way, he gave $1 million to Trump's inauguration. He went down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss his rear end. But what's worse is he's decided, we're not going to fact check anymore. We'll let the community just do that. Okay. Well, I want to see what happens when the Klan and the neo-Nazis start posting stuff. That kind of, to say we're not going to fact check is basically allowing any extremist, or worse, any liar to post anything they want. That is totally He's basically saying, I'm not taking any responsibility anymore. I'm doing what Donald Trump wants me to do.
Here's what you got to look at. Here's what you got to look at with that.
Hey, Kevin, real quick, let me set this up so people know what we're talking about. So if you don't know, Mark Zuckerberg, who of course is the CEO of Meta that owns Facebook, he recently went on the Joe Rogan podcast, which is the biggest podcast in the world. Now, Joe Rogan is a curious guy. I remember going back 5-6 years ago, you could say he was more of a leftist, middle of the road guy who was talking about how we need to come back wealth inequality and how we need to deal with climate change. Now he seems to have gone completely to the right. And he has all these robber barons, as I call them, on his show now, including Mark Zuckerberg, who in the interview said and complained that during COVID, the Biden administration officials called him, not Biden himself, and basically screamed at him and asked him to take down posts, who in Zuckerberg's opinion, what he said on the podcast was, well, these people were telling the truth about the side effects of COVID. He offered no evidence whatsoever, no digital or audio evidence. But he seems to have not only kissed the ring, but he's really buying into MAGA culture. Like the Biden administration was too extreme with a heavy hand. The people need to understand that the Federal Trade Commission is currently suing Meta for multiple reasons. And one thing that these big social media giants don't want to happen is to be regulated by the government. None of them want that. They want to be left alone to run their company the way they want to. And I understand it. I might feel the same way, although, if that's what's best for the people, that's what's best for the people. So that's the context in which Zuckerberg had this conversation.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
So what I was going to say is, one, I'm not a fan of how Joe Biden handled the situation. I do think that it was dangerously close to government interference in free speech. I will say that as someone who is a First Amendment and a free speech advocate, I think we should all be concerned when you see the government trying to come in and strong arm, messengers of information, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. And I understand all the reasons why the Biden administration might have felt like, hey, look, we're in a serious health emergency here. We're trying to limit misinformation and disinformation, and maybe they felt like Meta had a responsibility to take that on and to fact check or to get rid of that stuff. But this is where I think like the real conversation, as Phil was saying, is about, what are the regulations that might be necessary for big social media engines, kind of like a Meta or Instagram or all of these other platforms that we use right now. Because what Meta is not like your traditional mainstream media source, again, that has ethics and standards in which that they have to operate under, in terms of, we don't knowingly publish false information, in the Inquirer, in any media organization. We should not knowingly publish false information. That doesn't mean that false information doesn't sometimes get out. Again, I said knowingly. Sometimes things slip through the cracks. Sometimes things get in that are not true or that may be inaccurate. And then, to Tarris's point, that's where the correction comes in and says, hey, we missed this, or we didn't get it right. Here's the right information. Meta is not necessarily bound by that, because they're not what you would consider to be a quote unquote media organization. They're more or less kind of an aggregator of content. Like, they're not, by and large, we go on there, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, you go on there and you put the content on there. They're not creating the content. They're just simply providing the platform on which the content exists. Now, to what degree should they be responsible for that? Well, it can kind of be likened to, how do you police the internet? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's on the internet that people post on the internet, for good or bad. How do you police that? How do you regulate that in a country where free speech and the First Amendment is such a huge issue for us? So I think there probably does need to be, at higher levels, some conversation about, because these social media platforms are getting so big and they're the way in which we get information and the way we interact with each other, there probably does need to be some conversation around, do these things need to be regulated? Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, do they get regulated? Well, that's part of how the government wheels turn, but there at least needs to be a conversation about it, because Meta is so big and so many.
Do you believe
Say
it?
again?
Do you believe what Zuckerberg said?
That the Biden administration.
Yeah, he specifically said that there were some posts where people were they were posting things about the side effects of taking the COVID vaccine. And that's what he said the Biden administration wanted him to take
Well,
down.
I think
I'll be honest
it's
with you, I don't
factual.
believe
You don't believe him?
Yeah, I think we do know it's Well,
I
I think it
believe
has been proven that some people have had negative side effects that have come along with the vaccine. I don't even think that's
right.
disputable science right now. So
You
Yeah,
believe that
of
Zuckerberg
course.
was bullied, intimidated by the Biden administration? He said
I
it.
believe the Biden administration contacted him and said, look, if people are lying about the effects of the vaccine or spreading lies in the interest of the national public health, we're asking you to take that down. I do not believe that the Biden administration said, look, these are people that are telling the truth, but it's uncomfortable. Can you please take that down? I do not
There was
believe that. And Mark
I,
Zuckerberg is on Facebook. He's got more data than probably anybody on the planet other than Elon Musk. And he has no documentation, no audio, no me. He's got no documentation to back up these claims.
Have you
I don't
seen
believe
well,
it.
the
well,
Congress interviews, the hearings? Have you
yeah,
seen the committee?
that's what I was. That's
They
what I
have
was going
done
to say. You know,
extensive.
Yeah,
They've
yeah,
done extensive,
yeah, yeah.
man.
I
They
spent
testified to
today.
that.
I
raked
He
this
have
guy across the
testified to
protocol.
that.
coals. They've
Yeah, he
done him dirty.
testified to that
I
under
can't hear
the.
you.
He testified to that
Let
under
me
the
answer this
penalty of
real quick.
perjury before Congress. So that's pretty serious, I think. And of course,
You said what now, Kevin? I can't hear
no.
you.
I was saying that he testified to that under the penalty of perjury before Congress. I mean, what he said on Joe Rogan wasn't much different than what he said during his congressional testimony. And the
I
Biden
don't recall that.
administration has had, you know, a lot of opportunity to contest what Zuckerberg has said. They haven't really come out and called him a liar on it.
What it is,
And
guys,
I don't
is
believe,
it's not no
and I
fun.
See it for myself. I don't
It ain't no
recall that.
fun when the rabbits got the gun.
I don't recall that during
There's
this
no
testimony.
fun when the rabbits got the gun. The Democratic Party has held Mark Zuckerberg and Meta underneath their thumb, threatening them with DOJ committee hearings and having ruining it for the past 4 years. Or when he ran him through those subcommittee hearings, that was a lot. They raked him through the coals through. That's enough for him to say, now that Donald Trump's elected, to say, this is exactly what they did to me. And this is why Joe Rogan, you said Joe Rogan was a middle of the road. Let's come together. But whenever they plucked RFK and what they did to RFK, because it was so similar what they did to Ron Paul in 2012. Ron Paul had a great movement with him, but the Republican Party said, that's not the agenda that we want. We're not even going to let you speak at the RNC. So they silenced Ron Paul. Ron Paul didn't have social media to go to. That's what they were attempting to do with RFK. RFK with the Democratic Party, they were like, oh, nope, you're crazy, whatever. RFK said, okay, I'm going to go team up with Meta and with MAGA or Donald Trump. And this is the same play. And whenever they took Joe Rogan, you took RFK away from the Democratic Party, and then Joe Rogan went with him. And then Joe Rogan did the podcast with Donald Trump and humanized Donald Trump. That's the whole thing. That's the argument that I have with the mainstream media. Once you see independent people doing numbers, like I said before on this podcast before, on my TikTok channel collectively, I could show you where I've had probably during the election cycle probably 10 million impressions. People would say that's nothing to scoff at, but that's 10 million people I got to influence. And then people are like, and that's more than some mainstream medias get. So I'm saying what we could do is take a realistic approach to saying mainstream media is taking a hit. We need to pivot and move, because you're seeing more people doing independent. You see, I was on TikTok the other day, and Don Lemon is on TikTok doing what we've been doing on TikTok for years. Trying to engage conversation, doing exactly what we do, trying to use our way of doing things to reach people. So until there's a compromise of mainstream media realizing and saying, okay, we're obsolete, we're not reaching the people that we used to, we don't have that kind of pull.
Well, that's not
the
true.
Democratic Party,
That's another false narrative. I mean,
the Democratic Party needs to quit pushing their agenda using the mainstream media.
Without getting into the specifics. I mean, I can tell you that more people consume information from the Cincinnati Enquirer than probably at any point in time in the history of the newspaper. I mean, to the point of what you're saying, the method by which how we engage and communicate with people is changing, but not necessarily their desire for the information. I mean, even people who will tell you that, they don't read the Enquirer, they don't take the Enquirer, still, seemingly interestingly know everything that's kind of in the Enquirer, and they can talk to you about it. So I'm like, well, you're getting it from somewhere, whether they're reading it on WLW or that you may be getting it through a talk show host, but guess where they're getting it from? They're getting it from, you know, the Cincinnati Enquirer and WCPO or wherever. So this notion that mainstream media is dying, I think, is a over exaggerated narrative that kind of gets put out there. Yeah, the same people aren't buying newspapers like they were, you know, 50, 60 years ago, but we're also not chiseling on stone tablets anymore either. We you know, we use a variety of different methods to get, you know, to get the written and spoken word out now. So it doesn't mean that people's thirst or desire for the information has gone anywhere. In fact, it's only grown. So I think, you know, sometimes we get that narrative twisted, you know, and I often have to correct that.
Do we expect the government, like, is it, what do you expect, like, from a government during the COVID? And again, it's a very slippery slope. It's a very thin line, should I say, not a slippery slope. It's like you're up on a tightrope, because if you go too far with it, people are going to say you're trying to censor and infringe upon people's rights. But if you do nothing, then the consequences could be devastating to public health. So it's like, you know, what do you do? I mean, should we expect social media companies during a time of crisis to, for lack of a better term, censor out what they know and is provable to be propaganda or lies? Should we expect that from social media? Should we expect the government to put pressure on social media platforms during a moment of
You
crisis?
should find somebody that you believe in. Like, you can find somebody who you trust. And I've been saying that for 4 or 5 years. You should find somebody that you trust, that you get information from, that you trust to get information from. There's several people who I trust, like Anton Daniels. I trust Nate. I trust you guys. I'll listen to you guys and I'll decipher that from intelligence standpoint. But I think that it's going to move to more independent people that you trust.
If government wants to do anything, invest in more programs that help people be media savvy. You know, make media literacy a part of what we're teaching in our schools. I'm not an advocate of, you know, government interfering with free speech in any form, because, as you said, it's a slippery slope, because, you know, sometimes this stuff can get objective. You know, I've said the same thing about, you know, when the Klan used to come and they would be on Fountain Square and people would be like, oh, they shouldn't allow that. The city shouldn't allow that. And that's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, it's crazy up until the point that, you know, somebody says that they're uncomfortable with the NAACP, you know, being down on Fountain Square and categorizing some of the things that they're saying as hate speech when they're speaking out on racism. I mean, you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot now. People who are trying to flip the narrative and say that, hey, you're racist, or you're propagating hate speech if you're speaking out against racism, right? So it's a dangerous and slippery slope that you can go down when government can start telling you what you can print, what you cannot print, and controlling the narrative. I don't care what type of situation it is. And often, you know, emergency situations are used as a grounds to erode our freedoms. And if you are not careful, fear can be one of the main things that can lead you into dictatorship and authoritarianism quicker than anything else, because people will give up their rights under the guise of safety and security, and you got to be careful about that.
You know, it's an interesting conversation, because, like, on one hand, I hear you and I feel you, but on the other hand, it's like, if the government in Congress decided, you know what, we're going to start regulating Facebook. And as a part of that, this new hypothetical bill, we're going to put a tenet in there and says, listen, during a moment of crisis, you know, part of these regulations, you are not going to be allowed. You must censor out anything that is not provable science, right? If somebody is spreading lies and propaganda, then you, per these regulations, must stop this from being on your platform. That could happen. So what's the difference from the Biden administration calling you up without regulations and saying, look, in our opinion, this is dangerous to public health. Can you take this down? Like, to me, that's a soft way of dealing with it, as opposed to the heavy hand of regulations. But that's just kind of, can you guys hear me on that one?
But I don't think it was a polite phone call of Zuckerberg, will you please take this down? I believe it was a federal shakedown. And then whenever he bucked back a little bit, he found himself investigated and having the Department of Justice weaponized against him, similar to other people. I mean,
He wasn't weaponized against them. That's the proper function of government, to bring these people in and ask them questions. That's the only thing that happened to him. They asked him questions. He spent a couple of hours answering questions. That was it. Nothing else happened to him. He's the fourth richest man in the
Nathan,
world.
that's an interesting perspective. That's a very interesting
Yeah, it's a
perspective
good
that he
conversation.
was inconvenienced and had to go answer Congress, sit
Yeah.
there and grilled by
That's all that happened.
people who hate you and you hate them. Grilled for more than 2 hours. It was days. It was man.
Yeah, it was
Man,
a couple of days. Same thing happened with the guy from TikTok, though. The CEO of TikTok, they brought him before Congress. He spent a couple days taking heat. That's the function of Congress. They're supposed to do that. I don't think they hated him. I think they have some concerns about, the Facebook platform, being a place where people could spread lies and propaganda that could lead to other people
But they
losing
didn't
their
have-
lives. I can see a future in which all these social media companies might be regulated, but I think it depends on who's in office. Hence the reason why Zuckerberg is kissing the ring. He wants to appease Donald Trump and say, look, for the next 4 years, and maybe even possibly a J.D. Vance administration, I'm going to be nice with you guys, so please don't
That's
regulate.
exactly. I agree
And
with
I
you
guess-
100% because the Democrats, when they had it under Biden and Harris, they used it and they weaponized it against any conservative talking points. Any conservative talking points that I would censored so much on the,
That's
and
not
it was able to use Facebook in 4 years, especially after COVID, was used to give groups to pocket and weaponize and cancel people. They would get in these little Facebook groups and get around. Don't go to that business because he's a conservative. Don't do this one. Cancel this person.
That's not true.
Okay.
You do realize that January 6th was planned on Facebook,
And those are horrible people, man. Those are horrible, and I can admit those are horrible people. And on the other hand, when the Democrats use Facebook and social media to weaponize to hurt other people, they do it. It's both sides. It's not like the Republicans are doing all this.
There's no evidence whatsoever. I mean,
there's no evidence, but
There's no
when the
evidence.
rabbit has the gun, you'll see because things are going to change.
Oh, you like that? You like you got the
No,
gun now.
no, no. I'm saying Zuckerberg.
Let me kind of say what Tarris might be saying here is that, there was a lot of criticism, I think, of Twitter before Elon Musk, and maybe even, I would hear it routinely, even sometimes here in my work, from conservatives or people who felt like they were being censored because they might be saying things that couldn't be proven or were factually inaccurate, and so or might not even be up to our standards of how we might even deal with something. And so people would be like, well, that's censorship. Well, the difference between us and your platform is, or any other platform that you might go into is we have a responsibility. Again, our credibility is based on, presenting factual, accurate information. So we're not going to put out knowingly put out false information. So sometimes that means telling people, yeah, your comment's not going to make the cut here because you have no source for your information. You have no evidence. What you're saying is not based in fact. Now you can call that censorship, but that's not what it is. That's being a responsible journalist. Okay. You can call it censorship. That's responsible journalism, to not print.
It happens on both sides.
Right.
I know plenty of people on the left side who feel the same way, right?
To not print lies. Now, where that gray area sometimes comes in, let's just say for the sake of argument, you talk about science. For every study that says one thing, there's another study that somebody has somewhere that says something else. And so if somebody brings that to bear on the table, and this is actual, conflicting medical data or scientific data or whatever, then you're going to wind up a lot of times putting something out that people who are not on that side of the issue are going to be upset about, and they're going to accuse you of putting out misinformation and disinformation, even though there's a source of information that supports what the person is saying, even if you disagree with it. So there's a lot of unsettled science. There's a lot of unsettled medical information and things that are out there that are amidst some hot button issues right now. So it really is not quite always as black and white in these conversations when you're talking about misinformation and disinformation. And that's why I say it's a very slippery slope that you don't want the government involved in. What you want to have is responsible businesses and agencies who take that seriously and who police themselves.
But that's not going to
happen. Part of the reason why a lot of media organizations get out of the commenting, mainstream media organizations get out of the public commenting on their websites, is because people expect you to police that. If somebody says something that's false and inaccurate in a comment section, people expect you to address that. And when you think about the volume of comments that come in, that is very, very time consuming. So imagine a platform like Meta with so much information out there, how many people they would have to employ to fact check, verify, and correct every piece of information and content that's on their platform. Zuckerberg would go bankrupt, right? I mean, like, I don't even think.
No, they do that already.
Now they're changing they're moving those jobs. They're getting rid of those jobs and moving them to Texas, dismantling.
But they're not getting
dismantling the oligarch in California even more.
But I guarantee
no, they're not getting rid of them. They're moving them from California down to Texas. Like this idea, like if you're in a red state, you're going to start thinking like red state people. But no, from what I read, about 25,000 people have been employed across the globe in terms of fact checking, on top of a couple of third party agencies that were actually doing the fact checking for me.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like blindsided. Like, hey, we had no idea this was happening before Zuckerberg put out that announcement last week saying that we're going to end fact checking. So it's
one more point.
But I doubt even with all of that, they were catching everything.
But Meta, that's what Meta
Dana
does.
White.
Like, and they were doing a good. They seem to be doing
UFC's,
a good job of it, though.
The UFC's president Dana White is now a member of one of the members on the board of Meta. So can you see the direction of this is going to? Dana White was at the RNC right along. I think Dana White was the one who wrote the script for the RNC this year. Honestly, I do. That's a real statement. And now he's a part of Meta on the one of the boards. Can you see the direction that this is going in? And if you guys can't see it, this is another thing that I'm like, all right, cool. In about 2020.
No, we're talking about it. I fully admit it. Zuckerberg has bent his knee to the king in the South down at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, we got it. And the reason why is he's completely trying to protect his business.
But how is
and a little get back, and some get back, and a little bit of get back.
Look, we're on Zuckerberg, but how is Zuckerberg any different than any other millionaire or billionaire business person who is bending their knee, who's kissing the ring to the pro-business, Republicans? I mean, I'll just simply say it's not just Donald Trump. I mean, the Republicans' platform has always been, they pride themselves in being pro-business, little regulation, get government out of your life and out of your business. That's part of that's historically been a part of their platform. So it's not just Trump. So that's why so many businesses and rich people identify with the Republican Party, because they're the party of no regulation. So of course Zuckerberg, who doesn't want to be regulated, and every other millionaire who doesn't want the government breathing down their necks, putting a whole bunch of regulations on them, are going to kiss the ring. I mean, I get it. It's what they do. That's, as we talked about, that's the nature of the politics in the world that we live in.
Yeah, but the difference is
no. Go ahead.
I was going to say the difference is that a lot of people are, raising eyebrows is because this is the second term of Donald Trump. Zuckerberg didn't do this during the first term. He didn't run down to Mar-a-Lago and start changing where the fact checkers are going to be and start going on conservative podcasts, start talking that MAGA talk. He wasn't doing that then. So people are rightly raising their eyebrows and saying, what's different here? And I think there is a difference. I think the second Trump term is going to be a lot worse than the first.
Well, I think here's the difference. And it's not that, the Republicans per se are the guys that are the bad guys. They are, but
I didn't say bad guys.
Let me just finish.
Pro-business. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Republican Party has generally been pro-business, but as I think Nathan just pointed out, and actually there was a story in the New York Times the other day talking about how all these Silicon Valley guys used to all be Democrats, and now they're all supporting Trump. And I'll tell you the reason why. The reason is because past presidents, whether they were Republican or Democrat, basically didn't threaten to go after people who spoke out against them. Now, there was an exception, which was a terrible one, where Dick Cheney, to punish a guy named Joe Wilson, outed his wife, the guy's wife, as a CIA agent, which was disgraceful. But with that exception, Trump is really the first one who has out and out said, I'm throwing you in jail if you do this. Or he tells the FTC to revoke or FCC, revoke their license. He's the first one to do that. And you would think that, especially because these guys are all billionaires, you'd think they got enough money, they would have the guts to speak up and say, hey, I don't care if this hurts me financially. I'm opposed to this. I'm not going to kowtow to you. But they don't. They don't. They're cowards. They want to preserve their wealth and preserve their businesses. So they do exactly what Zuckerberg just did.
Well, what about, could you think there would be an alternative? There could be another way of thinking about this too. What you're saying might be correct, but they could be that the Democrats that had control treated them so bad and put so many regulations and did so much stuff and censored so much and made their life completely really crappy for so long, for 4 years, that when they lost, they were like, finally, this crap is over. We get to go do what we want to do.
Let me say this, Tarris. Look, made their lives crappy. These guys are billionaires. I doubt it. They're crappy as they wouldn't take yours in exchange for theirs. So look, these guys are not. Look, this is all about greed. This is about greed. This is about influence and power, and that's pretty much what it is. That greedy is the word that I would use, as opposed to cowards. They're protecting their interests, just like all of the politicians who've been their knee to Donald Trump are protecting their interests. This is all about self-preservation. And the unfortunate part about it is they will preserve their lifestyles, but in doing that, it's not going to improve the lifestyles of any of the MAGA folks, who really support it. Their lives aren't going to be made any better, because despite everything that these business people have told them over the years, give us tax cut, we'll create more jobs, didn't happen. They're in the interest of keeping their money consolidated and their power in, 90% of, the country's wealth is in 10%, of people's hands, maybe less than that. So that means 90%, the rest of us, that 90% of us, maybe except for Phil might be in that 10%. But the rest of us, the rest of us
below the belt. That was.
Are you a 1%,
Nathan,
Phil?
as the host of this, I want to report this man's comment to you right now.
That's censorship. That's censorship.
Yeah.
That's censorship, bro.
Wait, don't we have a committee, a fact-checking committee? I want to report him to the fact-check committee.
Yeah, I said maybe. I said maybe, Phil.
Oh yeah, that's how you guys always cover yourselves up. The word maybe. See, I'm being slandered here, and he says maybe.
Hey, Phil, you're right. We do have fact checkers. We have 5 students, but in keeping in line with bending the knee with the new Trump administration, we're moving from Cincinnati to Texas. I'll let you know when they get up and running. So I want to make sure Donald Trump is not mad at Hot Mike. So, and listen, we've been talking a lot of national topics. Let's switch to a local topic here for a second. And to kick it off, I've got a video clip of a local news segment. It's about a minute long, which is really, really long for this kind of medium, but it will give you a sense of what is going on here for folks in the audience who are not aware. And if you live in the Cincinnati area, even northern Kentucky, this is something that will impact you. Check this out and then give me your comments on the other side.
Businesses at the banks are pleading to keep it on the existing site.
WCPO 9 News reporter Andrew Rowan explains why Cincinnati's mayor is pushing back.
The study just doesn't think that that's realistic. Although, let me be clear, no decision has been made on a site. I first want to figure out how we pay for it.
At a roundtable hosted by Cincinnati's Rotary Club, Mayor Aftab Purival voicing support for a new arena, even without a major league tenant.
And we've got to do everything we can not to kick this down the road again.
Okay, before we go any further, I want you to rate the stash.
I was just about to say that. It looks like he's in the Hitler Youth or something.
Oh my God!
I give a thumbs down
please,
to the
from
stash.
0
I
to
noticed
10.
that.
Definitely a thumbs
whoever,
down.
Right here.
Whoever advised him on that look needs to be fired.
The stash is a -1, man. -2, -3,
Oh,
man. Lose that half tab. Come on, man. Come on, dude.
all right, a little bit of fun.
I
Okay,
like the
back.
mayor, but that mustache.
Pureval
It's
says
time to
he's
raise.
planning a public-private funding structure. That is different from the 2 riverfront stadiums funded by taxpayers, which FC Cincinnati president Jeff Berding admits left a sour taste.
There's no way that this needs a new tax on local residents.
Berding saying Thursday private investors contacted him about the arena project.
You can't say that you're a city on the move when out of the top 50 cities in the country, we have the worst arena.
The former council member also weighed in on the plea from businesses to keep the arena at the banks, saying it's an indictment on the neighborhood.
The banks is a disappointment. It's not what it was intended. It's not.
Regardless of where the arena ends up, Berding says the banks needs a new plan.
I think if we commit to that, the people down there that yesterday said, geez, we don't want to lose the arena because they think that that's it. And we need to do better by them in this community.
Berding's FC Cincinnati is embarking on a $300 million development project in the West End. It'll be just blocks from the convention center, where $240 million in renovations are about a year from completion.
Really, it's going to transition and transform the way that we as a city are able to sell conventions, sell events, bring those to Cincinnati, and continue to bring those over and over and over again.
Cincinnati's future.
And we'll stop it right there. So there it is. I mean, talks about a new arena, upgrading the Heritage Bank Arena. From what I'm gathering, a lot of people feel like this is a central piece to the development and the future of the banks and all of those businesses down there. Jeff Berding said that the banks basically is a disappointment. What do you think?
I'll go. Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Jeff Berding has special interests on the West Side, so of course he's going to say that. I mean, he's speaking like when we talk about different lenses of why people say things. He's got, like I said, $300 million of development on the West Side. He wants to keep all the development, and as he should. Me, being a resident of Dayton, Kentucky, member of a city council, and an economic developer, have a business in Covington, Kentucky, we're moving, and we're moving closer to Heritage Bank, which would be more of an economic developer, an economic driver. I understand what the Berding guy is saying for the West End and keep the West End, but you're talking about that 471 corridor loop that comes into Cincinnati. Since it's been shut down, several businesses on the levee have shut down. I know several businesses have good men, good women losing their jobs because that bridge is shut down. With a development of the project down there at Heritage Bank, it would, and we're building in Kentucky Riverwalk that goes from Covington all the way through Newport, all the way through the levee, all the way back to Bellevue, and all the way to Dayton. We're going to have a walk where you can have like bike trails and all that kind of thing. What more better way with people coming from Florence and from the southern part of the up to the Ohio River and coming? It's better to have it in a central location like there, in my opinion. Whether they keep the guts of it and rebuild on the outside of it, or completely tear it down and restart it from that structure right there. But I believe that's just my opinion. I think keep it where it's at for the bigger picture of everything.
You might want to jump in there. Kevin,
yeah, I think it's going to be a tough sell just in general, because a lot of it will depend on. I think the mayor said, in some of the reporting, that before you even get into where this thing should be, the first thing you got to figure out is how you're going to pay for it. And until you answer that question and you answer it in a way that's going to be palatable for the taxpayer in Cincinnati, I think arguing about where it's going to go is a moot point, because if you can't get it funded, it ain't happening regardless. And that's the biggest hurdle that they're going to have to go over. The reason why I think it's a tough sell is because, our city is in need. You could say we need an arena, and that's probably true. The city is probably losing out on a ton of opportunities and a ton of, tourism dollars and things of that nature that would be coming into the city. But I think it's a tough sell when you've got so many other problems in Cincinnati, neighborhoods that feel disinvested, people who are struggling to now try to tell them that they need to pony up more tax dollars for a new arena. when people are already still dissatisfied with the Reds and the Bengals stadium deal. You got negotiations coming up with the county on the Bengals, and who knows what they're going to get. I just think it's going to be a tough conversation to have with taxpayers unless they're going to come up with some creative ways to fund this thing to get it built. I think arguing about where it's going to go is, it's fun debate for shows like this, but I think it's a waste of time until you figure that piece out.
I agree, but just for the sake of argument, where do you think it should go? Should it be in the same spot? Should it be?
Where would do something new? Because here's the thing. I think that to Jeff Birding's point about the banks, by any objective measure, has been a failure. I mean, it has not borne out, I think, what people intended when the idea was conceived. I mean, if you go to places like Nashville and you look at their strip that they have down in Nashville, that's just humming with activity, with people, stores, restaurants, live music scene, all of that type of stuff. And then you look at the banks, like, man, come on, man. No serious person can look at the banks, and you go to cities like Tennessee and you see how live that is and how that's jumping. Cincinnati's dead as a doornail. Yeah, you gotta admit that the banks has been a failure. So you need to do something different down there, and maybe moving the arena to a new site, and tearing down Heritage Bank Arena and using that land for some new uses that can reinvigorate the riverfront and the banks down there might be worth considering.
My biggest mistake.
What would be a better driver?
Yeah,
my biggest mistake, I'll let you jump in there.
When I was on city council, was voting for the Bengals deal. And maybe I deserve a little understanding because it was my first year, and I kind of, the big business guys say this is great. And I regret that because basically I think we just got kind of screwed in the deal and weren't willing to walk away. But so I'm very wary of anything where it's public financing. But, I just returned from I was in Nashville this past weekend visiting my daughter who's in college there. And I went to a hockey game at their Bridgestone Arena, which is just beautiful. And I would agree with, I can't remember, I guess it was Jeff Birding, whatever. But I agree that kind of thing is important because let's face it, as Kevin, I think, just said, if you compare the Nashville downtown to Cincinnati's, there's no comparison. There's just no comparison. So I would support getting the new arena, but it has to be, as the mayor said, kind of a public-private type thing. It can't be just a taxpayer-funded thing.
Should it be where it is now in the existing Heritage Bank Arena site, or should they put it somewhere else? Because that's what the businesses on the banks are saying. They're saying, look, we need an anchor. We need this here. But what do you take, Phil?
Let's be honest. There's already the baseball stadium is pretty close to that, and this is one of those things where I would defer to the experts. There are studies you can do that have probably been done that show what the arena would do to add to our tax revenues, whether it's there versus say being over the Rhine where the baseball stadium probably should have gone. But I would defer to the kind of experts that have done the studies as to where the most bang for the buck will be in terms of location.
Just on the Kentucky side of the perspective, I know we're moving over here. Right at my business, 2 blocks up the street, we're building a $1 billion development right there at the IRS building site, huge. And then it goes over to Ovations, and it's connected to Ovations in Newport. Margaritaville is coming in Newport on the Levee. Then we're going to go over to Bellevue, and where I'm at in Dayton, I'm telling you, if they fumble down there with this Heritage Bank, that thing, it's going to put us in a prime position to keep people that come to go to downtown Cincinnati. When they come up this far, we're going to, hey, you don't got to go over to Cincinnati. You can stop right here in Kentucky and Northern Kentucky. We got everything. And plus, you ain't got to deal. You can go over the bridge. We can that would be something I would think about on the Cincinnati side of it, because on the Kentucky side of it, our infrastructure, from a perspective of watching this go down, we're going to be ready. And as you can see how things go even flow. When I first moved here, Covington was pretty lit, man. Waterfront, Yucatan liquor stand, Applebee's, Beale Street. That's whenever that development first came, Newport on the Levee. We had it there for a little bit, and it flows back and forth. So if there's not something that, if you don't make a statement and put a staple down there, I could see where Jeff Girding's saying that it's dead, and then we'll put the nail in the coffin. I'll try to help.
Oh, look at you. I like that. That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, here we go again, talking about another arena. And I wish we could have some different conversations about some different investments that could really get our downtown or our banks revitalized. I want to make an old point here. I want to go back about 10 years ago and make a point about a woman named Liz Rogers who owned a restaurant named Mahogany's. And it didn't survive for very long. And she took a lot of heat. People were criticizing her and her business acumen.
Well-deserved criticism, I might say.
Well, let me get to my point. People were criticizing her and her business acumen. But at the time, what I believed, and now Jeff Girding's kind of backed it up with this statement, is that, Liz Rogers didn't fail the banks. The banks failed Liz Rogers because there wasn't enough. There wasn't and still is not enough of a draw on the banks to really.
That isn't why she failed.
That is exactly why she failed. And Jeff Girding, now 10 years later, is still making the same point. There's nothing going on down there other than when you got, NFL and Major League Baseball to drive people go.
I remember that situation very well. I think I was city council, I think at the time. The city, first of all, if I recall, gave her just a ton of money, okay, without really checking into her reputation or business acumen, which I recall, as best I can recall, was not particularly good. There had been some previous debt situations and stuff, but the city just threw the money at her, and it was all wasted. Okay, so I have a tough time
investing in entrepreneurs, a person that's putting people to work.
Again, if you're going to give a bunch.
Hold on, Phil. Phil. Investing in a local entrepreneur that's producing jobs for other people is always a great investment. But as we know, the restaurant business is hard, especially on the banks. You've had some major chains. You got some major.
The point is her track record. Her track record, if I recall, and this goes back, was pretty poor. She did not have a history of successfully operating restaurants, as best I recall. So why do you pour all that money into her? Why not give it to somebody? I don't have a problem with the supporting local businesses, but why not support somebody who has a track record of knowing how to run restaurants? And
that's what, look, I'll say this, that what Phil is saying is a fair criticism, if but for the fact that the city has a track record of making bad investments in, the wrong people, period. Liz Rogers just seems to be one in which we want to focus in on. And I think we understand why, because everything around that was about getting, minority representation down on the banks. That was a big deal.
I didn't want to say that, but
she was the person who was selected for that. And I think there would even be some Black entrepreneurs, restaurateurs in Cincinnati who would argue that they would have been a better fit down there than Liz Rogers. And I, as I recall, part of the conversation was there were some Black restaurateurs in Cincinnati who were pretty upset that the city went outside of Cincinnati to bring in someone, let alone someone whose track record was questionable. I'll just say that. So what Phil is saying is true. But the larger point, I think there are many reasons why Liz Rogers wasn't successful. Some of it her track record, some of it her business practices, some of it what you said, Nathan, because hers is not the only restaurant that has failed at the banks. So I think that's the important thing. Take race out of it, take Liz Rogers out of it. There have been a bevy of restaurants that have been located on the bank that haven't made it. Well, and that's where I was saying kind of like what your point, your larger point is that there's not an ecosystem prevalent around the banks, namely, enough people who live down there who can be, constant frequenters, or the right mix of different types of businesses that are down there that are going to draw people. You can't just rely on Reds and Bengals because those are seasonal. What do you have down there for people when the Reds and Bengals aren't operating? Tarris, thank you for Yucatan Liquor Stand, man. I've been trying to think of the name of that business for the
50
last
cent
year.
drinks.
I've been having some conversations with some friends, and we could not remember the name of that place. So thank you for that.
50
But
cent.
but to the larger point, why I bring that up jokingly, is that, you know, nightlife and that sort of thing is a young people's game, right? You know, and I just don't think Cincinnati presents enough opportunities for young, you know, old fogies like me, man. I'm in the house at 9, 10 o'clock.
You're definitely on the back nine. There's no question.
You're definitely on the back nine, man. I might be on 17 or 18. You know what I'm saying?
As compared to me.
But what is Cincinnati offering in terms of getting young people who are going to be out, who are going to be hanging out down at the banks and things of that nature, who are going to frequent places like that? And that's coming up with the right mix of businesses and attractions that are going to get younger folks out and be down there. You know, you can't, you know, I get the bar and restaurant type deal, but you got to have more than that if you're going to.
Well, they had a big Ferris wheel for a while.
Man.
That was a big
That's exactly the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Like you.
But that was a good idea, though. It worked. But let me take Phil to task. Phil, you're dead wrong to say that woman didn't have business acumen. I think every entrepreneur learns from mistakes.
That's good. So we should choose somebody who's failed.
Just so you know,
because that's a sign of a good entrepreneur.
Most successful entrepreneurs fail to success. That's a part of the process. But just so you know, Phil, as we sit here right now, Liz Rogers has a successful business. She's had several successful restaurants. And she also has a successful national brand called Creamalicious. So to say this woman don't have business acumen, a good business acumen,
I didn't say present. I didn't use present.
The number one reason why she failed is it was the wrong place at the wrong time. There wasn't enough of a driver other than just the Reds and Bengals to sustain that type of business on the banks. Hold on, Phil, I'll give it back to you. The woman deserves props for being one of those Black-owned pioneer restaurants to try to kick something starting on the banks. It just didn't work out.
Well,
that's it.
I think I'm glad to hear that she's had some successes. That's good for her, and that's great. I'm saying, and I said this when I was on city council, if you're going to take a bunch of taxpayer money, okay, give it to somebody who at that time has a strong chance of success based on their track record. Don't give it to somebody that doesn't have that track record, because the chances are they're going to go bust and the money's going to go down the toilet, which is exactly what happened in this situation.
And that's exactly what happens with most restaurants. That's just a tough business. And then you never really, track record or not, you never really know whether somebody's going to be successful until you get 7 years down the line.
Don't you agree in almost any profession, if we're going to hire a doctor, you want to have, for some big matter or some big position, you're going to get somebody right out of medical school? I don't think so.
But
you're going to get somebody who has a track record of excellence in their profession, and it isn't like there weren't other people, as I think Kevin may have said. It isn't like there weren't other people at the time they could have found. I don't care if it's Jeff Ruby or whoever. It isn't like they couldn't find somebody who had a strong track record, because that person is going to have a better chance of success than somebody who hasn't been successful.
Consider this, to your point about track record. Consider this. And Nat put this in there. You had Toby Keith. Now, Toby Keith had a great national track record. It was a national brand, and they failed on the banks. So track record is not always the best indicator of being successful in the restaurant business. Time and location matters. And I think, to Jeff Birding's point in the video I showed, the banks is just not that place yet. It can be that. I hope it becomes, but it's just not that place.
And let me say this, as far as the track record, and again, you know, it seems like I hate to bring this up because Phil always likes to say, you know, and Kevin and some of the others, that it's all about race. But here's what I'll say here's what I'll say is one of the unfortunate things. And look, we can't get around when we're talking about this notion of Liz Rogers and the bank. Like, the context matters. You know, they wanted a minority representation down on the banks. That look, that you can't argue with the facts. That's what it was, and they were going to make sure that happened. and taxpayer
Yeah,
dollars.
I'll
Let me
argue
finish,
whether
Phil.
that should be the
Let me
criteria.
finish, Phil. Let me finish, Phil. Taxpayer dollars were going to be put into that. What I was going to say is one of the unfortunate things is, and they wanted it to be somebody relatively local, Cincinnati or Cincinnati adjacent. The challenge that you run into with that is that you don't have a ton of like big time. I'm not talking about, smaller run restaurants or businesses that have been around. There are a lot of them, but I'm talking about large scale chains or significant size restaurants that are Black owned and Black run, right? That's just a product of the landscape. And that is going to lend you to a very different type of owner than someone who is used to running or has bigger, larger, more white owned establishments, right? It's difference between a Jeff Ruby and a Liz Rogers.
Yeah, but that's my whole criticism.
And most of the black restaurateurs in Cincinnati, there's a big difference between those two.
Yeah,
and a lot of that has
based
to
on
do.
race.
Wait, let me finish, Phil. A lot of that has to do with opportunity and the ability to have chances and to even fail forward. The great thing about what Liz Rogers is that, she failed at the banks, if you want to look at it that way. Wasn't successful. Business had to close. But she was able to parlay that experience and whatever else into some other successful enterprises that she's done.
Right.
And a lot of Black restaurateurs don't get that opportunity.
Well, can I say something?
Let me just respond quickly to that. This is an argument we've had from time to time, and I'll continue to make it. We're talking about economic development at the banks. That was the goal. So I don't care if they choose somebody who's white, Black, Asian. I don't care. But the point is, when you decide that we have to have somebody of a particular race or gender, whatever the heck it is, to me that's bad from the beginning. Okay, why not pick somebody, whatever race, that is going to have the likeliest chance of success, so we don't end up with the banks in the situation it is now.
But to Nathan's point, there have been tons of restaurants that have been down there, most of them white owned, and most of them have, well, I won't say most, but many of them have failed. And this gets back to the point of what we're talking about is opportunity, Phil. It's an opportunity. And I think it's always good for the city to invest and give its citizens or its adjacent citizens an opportunity.
You're telling me they couldn't find a Black entrepreneur anywhere in the country that had a better track record than hers? No, they couldn't find it anywhere in the country.
He fitted the narrative.
What do you care where the person
They wanted somebody local.
That's to me a silly thing right there. Oh, we have to have an African American that lives here. Who the heck? As long as they have, if you're going to even say, which I don't agree with, we're going to have a quota here. It's got to be a Black person. Okay,
it's about providing opportunity, Phil. It's not about a quota. It's not about a quota. It's about providing opportunity.
It's like police chief. We changed the system that I supported to be able to interview anybody.
Phil, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, Phil. The first job that you got, right? Were you the most qualified person for that job? Had you ever done it before? Did you have any track record or experience? No. Let me answer that for you, Phil. No, and the reason.
Yeah, but I was the best they could. I was the best they could get. Okay.
Yeah. This goes to my larger point. This just goes to my larger point. How many great business minds are going to apply to be a camp counselor or whatever the heck I was? I'm just using that as an example. What my
taxpayer money wasn't used to hire me. At least I think.
Phil, look. Let's put that aside for a minute and let me make my larger point. My larger point is that most of us, when we've been given opportunities, were not qualified or quote unquote may not have even been ready for it. But there were people who took a gamble on us, who saw the potential, who believed in the possibility that if just given a chance, you could be.
So we should gamble with tax dollars. Let's not choose the most qualified. This is my
look. The city gambles with. Look, as I've said, Phil, the city has backed the wrong horse on numerous occasions. So don't act like Liz Rogers is the first bad bet that the city of Cincinnati has ever made.
I agree, but your point
you
is
said you
that
voted for a bad bet
essentially
with
what
the
you're
Bengals.
saying is we should choose somebody who doesn't have a strong track record because of their race instead of somebody, whatever their
I didn't
race,
say that.
that has
I
a
didn't say
strong
that.
track.
I didn't
No,
say
we
that.
didn't say that. Phil, you know what I think is fair? If you look at the success that Liz Rogers is having today, as I said, she has a national brand. Her Creamalicious brand is around the country in
I'll
Kroger
use Kevin's
stores
own
and other
words,
stores
gamble.
around the
Kevin
country.
said it very well. He
So,
wants us to
so
gamble
look
with
at,
tax dollars. I don't
let
believe
me
that.
finish the point, Phil. So if you look at the success that Liz Rogers is enjoying today,
Still gamble.
that proves that she was a good investment.
A good
Sometimes it
investment.
works,
Lost all the
sometimes
money.
it
How can you
doesn't.
call that a good investment?
Phil,
That
do you think
She
she
didn't
might have been
lose all
set
the
up? Do
money.
you think she could have been set up?
She didn't lose
You
all
think
the
it could be
money. Her
unrealistic
business closed
expectations?
because the banks was not enough of a draw to bring people down there on a regular basis to her store.
Anybody
That's
who's
the
going to
point.
open a restaurant has the opportunity to do whatever studies they need to before they take the money. Okay. Now, any business person,
And you're assuming that she didn't just because the restaurant closed? Most restaurants close. I don't know the numbers, but it's upwards of 70%.
And it's opportunity. I'm sure, like when Liz
Period.
was presented this opportunity, I'm not sure who did it, but let's say Messer Construction. They're like, here, you're going to get your build out however you want to, and she was like, all right, cool, and she gets to do all this kind of stuff. And
I'll
it's
tell you
like, okay,
something else. I'll tell you something
well,
else.
no, let me finish.
What I
Let me
found on
finish the
city
point. Let me
council
finish the
was
point,
the
Phil.
money.
Let us finish the point, Phil. We gotta let us finish the point.
All right.
When
Okay.
she got as a black woman, she gets this opportunity. And then the expectations are way up here for her because there's businesses that close every day. It's like people said, Toby Keith, like right here in Covington, a veteran closed a business after a year, and they put $500,000 into. And the headlines read the headlines with Liz with Mahogany's was black entrepreneur failed business, black this, black misuse of this, miss black. But this veteran was veteran business owner falls. So there's a connotation that goes when you're a black entrepreneur, and especially a black woman entrepreneur, that your expectations are up here. And I believe that's why they chose her, because Mahogany's was the hottest restaurant at that point when the banks was coming up. And they're like, we want to keep it on a level to where like you can't, certain people demographic won't show up to the place. So we can get Liz Rogers, give her a budget, let her pimp this place out, let her have jazz and brunch on Sundays and try to draw people down here. But when that Pacific thing doesn't work because parking's difficult downtown, the people who frequent her businesses is not the general demographic that goes down there. And then when her business fails, they point the finger about all this and that. And as an entrepreneur, I don't think that any restaurant, they operate on a $1 per $100 budget. Like when every $100 they make $1. How do you operate on that? And to put black on top of it down there in the banks, I think she was set up. I think it was something that
was set up.
I think it was
we, the taxpayers, were set up. That's it was set up. And by the way,
unrealistic. Moving the goalpost. That's what they do with black a lot of time. So here you go, here you go, and then they watch to see us fall, and they were like, "See, that's why we shouldn't give them the position. That's why we shouldn't give them the position. This is you waste the taxpayer's dollar. That's why I've made it a point in my entire business career I've only taken I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years, probably $2,000 worth of city money on grants and rent reabatement. Because if it fails, I don't want them to say anything. I want to say I failed because of me, not because of the taxpayer.
One other point I should make from my experience. It usually often the money goes to somebody who also has some influence on city council, some connections with city council, and it's white and black, okay, which is another bad thing, okay? Just because you got a couple council members that for whatever reason, politically or financially, are pushing it, that, with all due respect, was a bad investment. And again, I think Kevin used the right word. It was a gamble. It was a gamble. If you want to gamble with your own money, fine. Let's not gamble with the taxpayer money.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this, and hopefully I can get this out uninterrupted by Phil. And I just want to make this.
I
just want to make this point that the city, I won't use gamble because that has a pejorative. The city takes risks all the time on organizations, on businesses, black, white, or whatever. They do it all the time. Some hit, some fail. That's the nature of when you provide opportunities. Where I do agree with what Phil was saying, and to a degree what Tarris is saying, is in terms of setting up Liz Rogers. Look, let's just be real. And again, this is where I bring in the racial dynamics of this stuff. Let's just think of every Black restaurateur that we know around the city of Cincinnati. Nathan, Black restaurants that you go to. When you go in there, how many white folks do you see dining at those Black-owned restaurants when you go in there?
Good point.
They can't handle the spice.
What is the point? I don't understand.
I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get
Okay.
there. So you want to talk about whether it's a setup or study or work that should have been done.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we know just from anecdotal evidence, and I'm just going purely off anecdotal evidence, that any Black restaurateur that you would have chosen to go down there on the banks is going to face an uphill battle because of the racial dynamic in Cincinnati, that white folks who any business that's going to thrive and survive and be successful, particularly at that level at the bank, you got to have white patronage. I just hate to say it. The fact of the matter is, if white folks are not going to patronize your business,
are you saying that white people don't patronize Black-owned businesses?
I'm simply stating a fact that if you go to Phil, what's the last? Let me ask you this: what's the last Black-owned restaurant you went to?
I'll tell you exactly. I don't know, because I can name my 5 favorite restaurants, and I have no idea if it's owned by a white or Black person.
Well, let's name them. Let's name them, and I can probably tell you whether they Black-owned or not. And I think you have a sense or an idea.
No, I don't look at.
Do you go to any food, ethnic food genre? Where do you go if you want to get some soul food? Where would you go?
Okay, let's just. Well, first of all, I can't remember the place I ate there about a couple weeks ago in Avondale. I can't remember the name of it, but that's not the point. The point is.
Here's the point. It's my point.
First of all, are you telling me the only restaurants Black? You're saying the only restaurants Black people can own or will own are soul food restaurants? I think that's the meaning.
Not generally, but mostly.
Phil, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you look at the landscape and you look at the Black-owned restaurants that are here in the city, what I'm saying to you is they are not largely patronized by white residents in Cincinnati. They're just not.
See, I as a consumer, somebody who likes to go out to restaurants, I don't care or don't know who owns them. So I don't understand. You tell me that white people, like if they go to, like I go to Forno, Italian restaurant I like in Montgomery. Let's take that as an example. I have no idea who owns that. I have no idea if they're white or Black.
What I'm saying to you is I don't know why they don't go. All I know is, and all I think that most Black people in Cincinnati would tell you is that when you patronize a Black-owned restaurant, when you go in there are no white customers. Or if there are white customers, there might be one or two.
That might apply if it is a soul. So I get if it's a soul food place. I get that. But
that's what we're saying. Mahogany's with soul food.
Yeah.
Your whole assumption is that people go to restaurants know who owns the restaurant, what race they are.
Mahogany with soul food specific.
Can I say something, Phil? You know, if you go back about 10 years ago and what Kevin was just saying kind of jogged my memory, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I remember what happened now. So, you know, there was a big controversy about her even giving the funding. And there were a lot of people saying the same things you're saying, like, oh, it's color coded. Why are you giving this unqualified Black woman? And there was so much talk and hate about her on radio locally that I got the sense that a lot of white people decided to just boycott her just because they thought that she shouldn't get the money in the first place.
Thank you, Nathan. I was eventually going. You got to eventually where I was going to try to get. I'm gonna let you finish, but I just wanted to thank you because to draw all of
that's what happened with her. It wasn't fair at all. And then to Dwayne's point, he writes, there was no other reason to go down there other than Mahogany's for urban customers. So Mahogany's had two things going on. You had this local anti-Mahogany's movement from white people because they were mad because she was
I think your facts are wrong. I think your facts are wrong.
No, I'm a factor of one point. And then the other part about it was for black customers, to Dwayne's point, there wasn't enough of a draw for us to go down there other than for her, which takes us back to the point in the
You're
first
saying
place
you
about
patronize
what Jeff
restaurants based on
Birding
you
said.
think
Is that
patronize restaurants based on the
let me get it all
skill of
out.
the owner.
Hold on,
That's what
Phil.
you're saying.
Hold on, Phil. Which goes back to the point I made earlier about Jeff Birding, is that the banks is not what it needs to be. The banks failed Mahogany's. I just took this opportunity to make that point.
I
Mahogany
think, again,
did not fail the
we're all
bank.
looking back. I think your history is incorrect. I believe the controversy.
I'm 100%
believe the
perspective
about Mahogany's was after it had failed or was failing, and there was a big debate, if I recall, on city council, or are we going to go after her for the money? And my recollection is I was outvoted. They did not want to even pursue her for the money. That's my recollection, but I can't be sure because it's a long time ago.
I think Nate's talking about connotation, because I heard about the Mahogany's was from white people in circles talking about how Liz got this money, and I'm over in Kentucky,
right?
And I wanted to go over to Mahogany's because I want soul rolls, I want that kind of food, I want to be able to go and have brunch and listen to hip hop music. So yeah, of course I would go over there, but whenever I would go over to the banks to go to Mahogany's, I would feel kind of like, oh man, because believe it or not, on the outside looking in, Cincinnati, in my opinion, is one of the most segregated cities in the United States of America. I'm talking, it's black. And I'm from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, where it's an integrated, like black. I mean, everything's integrated. You see, but when I moved here to Cincinnati, I had a rude awakening on how black and white things were. So to put Mahogany's down there on the banks, to me, that's why I say it was a setup. They weren't going to support her. When I first moved here, and I would go down. Hold on, Phil. And I'll land here. Phil. I'll land here. I'll land here. I would go down Main Street, and I go down there and Have a Nice Day Cafe and all the Jump and all that kind of stuff was going on, and it'd be full lines of white people, and then there'd be little Jump was the only integrated club that they had, and then they gave it to J. Raj and Deba, and that was the only black club. So you see a line of white people going into one club and a line of black people going into another club, and I was like, where am I at?
Yeah. Phil, let me put you on a point for a little bit. So you were on city council when this whole thing went down, right?
I have to back up on that. I don't know. I remember it being discussed when I was on city council, but in fairness, I don't remember the timing at this point, because I was on city council from 1993 to 2001, and as I said, I do remember discussion on it, but I can't be sure about the time.
Well, let me ask you this. That's fair. Let me ask you this. When Mahogany's was up and operating, did you ever go patronize the restaurant? Okay, I did. Harris, did you go?
What does that have to do? What does that do with anything?
Yeah, I've been there. But it's to the Lord.
That makes the point that Kevin was saying. That's the point about black-owned restaurants. There was almost like a white backlash against her because of all.
Let me ask you this. Can
I just interject this before Phil says what he says? Again, my larger point, to the point of success, her being successful or being set up. Let's just face it. Many black restaurants are soul food restaurants. Why? Because that's what black people cook. That's what black people eat. That's what's successful is. That's what's going to make you successful if that's largely your customer base. Not saying that white folks don't eat soul food, but not every white person eats soul food. Not a lot of white people eat soul food. Okay, so if you are going to put a black-owned soul food restaurant down on the banks and not evaluate the challenges that restaurant.
Whose job is it to evaluate? He's the one who put the proposal in. Nobody put her there. She wanted that money, and
we got to put a mute button on him.
She's the one who didn't have the plan.
Phil, I'm not Phil. I'm actually trying to agree with if you would let me finish.
Good. Then I'm
actually trying to agree. I'm actually trying to give you a little bit of props.
Okay.
No interruption here.
Now it's okay.
Okay. Look, I'm putting this back on the city. If I'm Liz Rogers, of course I'm going to take the money. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. If I'm Liz Rogers, I'm probably not going to think I'm going to fail. I'm going to bet on myself. So of course I'm going to take it. I'm going to go for it. It's a hell of an opportunity. So I'm not mad at Liz Rogers for taking it. What I'm saying is that, to your point, Phil, somebody on city council should have looked at this and said, are we setting her up for success? Yes, we want to give her the opportunity, but are we doing everything to set up this minority business owner for success, understanding and knowing the challenges that she's going to face? You got to park downtown. You got to spend money to park downtown. And plus, if I'm going to make a night out of going downtown to see Liz Rogers, there got to be something for me when I go down there. And let's just face it, a lot of black folks just ain't about hanging at the bar, you know, throwing back beers. There's different types of activities.
Black people don't go to bars?
They do. But I'm just saying there's a different type of scene, that night scene, that I think primarily. And
okay,
again,
what I say,
these
okay,
are somewhat generalizations, but I'm
summarize.
just saying that culturally there are differences.
What I hear you saying, just like what I hear you saying is, first of all, again, I want to repeat again, this is a long time ago, so I'm stating that very clearly, but I'm just giving you my best. First of all, anytime you have a situation like this where the city's going to provide financial support, it is always the business who makes the proposal. This is, in other words, I have no doubt that she put a proposal together, give me this much money, and I will on the banks, and I will be successful. Okay, so it wasn't like, oh, the city pushed her there. Okay, I have no doubt that she put in.
But you're critical of the city for giving her the money. You're saying they should have picked somebody with a. You're saying they should have picked somebody with a better track record. That's what you're saying. You're critical of the city's decision to give her the money. So regardless of what her business plan is, what I'm saying to you is this is why cultural competence is important, and why, when, no offense, but why when people like you get in these elected positions, because you're obstinate and blind to the types of things that I'm trying to tell you that will help you make better decisions as an elected official and go through a different type of thought process so that you don't wind up with a Liz Rogers type situation. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the stuff that, again, the blind spots that a lot of white folks have, and they don't have the patience. They always want to interrupt when you're trying to tell them, and they don't want to listen.
I don't do that.
I'm trying to school you and educate you on the things that you need to be thinking about, other than if you want to do more other than just pay lip service and just put somebody black downtown or in some situation where they're going to fail. That's only going to increase for a lot of reasons. That's not just solely on the owner. To keep this racial divide and this conversation about quotas and everything else going. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to discuss a different way of going about this, but you want to argue it at the simplest concept. I'm saying I agree with you. City council should have did some more homework and said, look, is a black soul food restaurant on the banks really gonna make it? That should have been part of the conversation. Liz Rogers or Roy Rogers or whoever the hell you want to talk about, like, that should be part of the conversation realistically, knowing Cincinnati, knowing the demographics and how people move. Is this going to work?
I think that's a fair statement. I think that's fair, what you just said. I do.
Mm-hmm.
So let me bring it back to, we were talking about, are talking about Heritage Bank Arena and what's going to be the future of it. Will it remain on the banks? And when I first read the story, my first thought was, okay, great. Here we go. Another sports arena. I'm looking for some different ideas on how to be a driver economically. Not to say I have them. But my biggest question is, who's going to make money out of this? Is it going to be the same old people making money? Like, is there a way to fashion these projects so that we can actually help to close the wealth gap here locally? I mean, it just seems like the same old rich people.
Oh, come on. You guys told me so.
It seems like the same old rich people keep on getting rich, and the racial wealth gap in Cincinnati never gets addressed, even when we have public dollars. Let me get it out, Phil. I know that I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong, but let me get it out so the people can make their own decision. So it seems like with these projects, it's the same old wealthy white people that keep on getting rich over and over again. And you might have a black-owned business that does this or that, but at the end of the day, even if there is public tax dollars, it never moves the needle for anybody other than the people who are already at the top. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I kind of feel about this. I'm like, yeah, they're going to do it. Do we need a new arena? Probably. But the same old people are going to come out on top. and it'll be business as usual. At the end of
Here's
day.
the difference, I think, between the way you're looking at it, the way I look at this stuff. Okay, you're looking at it as whether it's a new arena or any kind of a new, I don't know, whatever, housing development, whatever. That's not a good example. Whatever the commercial thing is involved, your attitude is, well, the important thing is that this money go to people who really need it, okay? Or my attitude is,
No.
look, when it comes to something like a facility on the banks or a new arena, I don't see that as a way to get. First of all, it's only one or two people that are going to own the thing. So if there are two African American entrepreneurs that make a bundle, that's not going to make any difference to the overall population. My attitude is those kind of structures, if they are successful, and Mahogany's would have been a restaurant, would have been an example. If they're successful, they're going to produce jobs and economic and money into the city, money to the city. So when it comes to, for example, Heritage, whatever the arena they're talking about building, I'm interested in a successful, attractive arena like the one in Nashville, not who owns it. I don't care.
We just look at what success means. Like for me, I'm just looking at it differently. Like the old way of thinking is wealthy white people keep getting wealthy. And just because some people are making $15 an hour, that's successful. I don't look at it that way. I'm asking the question, are we making new millionaires? Are we closing the racial wealth gap? Are we using these projects, if that's possible, to lift people up? You know what I'm saying? I think it's important. Like if you're born in Cincinnati, what's the likelihood that if you're born in, let's say, the lower class, that you can die in the upper middle class or in the high class, if you want to use those kind of terms? That's all I'm saying is I'm just kind of looking at these projects a little bit differently and not just the same
So
old
here's
way.
what I would agree with Phil on is I think, when you are talking about taxpayer dollars, all right, as an elected official, you have a responsibility to be fiscally sound. So where I reject what Phil is saying is I'm not just saying give the money to anybody or someone who's not qualified or someone who is not in a position to be successful. That's always what these conversations about inclusion get boiled down to is, hey, we're giving something to somebody who's not qualified or is not deserving. And that's what I reject about inclusion conversations. Inclusion conversations are about allowing capable people to come to the table and giving them an opportunity that they would not otherwise get because they're not in a position of wealth and affluence. But you've got to start somewhere to be able to get that and build that. So if we're ever going to have Black developers of any substance, the Black developers that we do have, no matter how small, have to have an opportunity to build their business up. Now, that doesn't mean you put them in charge of a project that they can't handle, that they're going to blow and fail. But it does mean if you have an opportunity to boost segments of your community as an elected official by giving them opportunities that they can handle and that they can be successful in, that allows them to climb that ladder, that to me is good government, right? That's government at its best because you're lifting up, segments of your community. Again, to Nathan's point, not just allowing the rich to get richer. Hey, the rich gonna get their money anyway. Look, if you are in a position to be able to finance and afford to build an arena, like FC Cincinnati did or whatever, you're talking about billionaires, millionaires. You're talking about the lenders, people who got, people who got more money than God. Basically, they ain't hurt. They're gonna get theirs regardless out of whatever project we're talking about. And oftentimes they've got money to bring to the table to bear. We know that in minority communities, that's not the case. Minority communities don't have that type of wealth and they don't have those type of dollars to bring to bear on projects, namely because when you keep it within the network, the rich getting richer, you never allow the people in the lower levels to develop and be able to get to that place where they can even participate in those types of conversations.
And it has to be done with intentionality. Yeah. Like you have to have the mindset of what Kevin was speaking of going into the project in order to get that out of the project. That's the point I'm kind of making. I agree, 100 millionaires, they've got the money to finance these kind of projects, but what type of jobs? Are we talking about $20 an hour, $25 an hour, $40 an hour, $50 an hour. We're talking $15 an hour with no real benefits. I mean, gone are the days where we pass those off like those are good jobs. That's the point that I'm trying to make with that. But let's move on here. I've got a clip that I want to play for you. It's a little bit off of the hard politics. And I saw this on Facebook, and it really speaks to the culture wars and where we are at this particular moment. I want to play this video for you and then get your reaction. Check this out. Hold on one second here. Let me pull the video up.
Is Kevin in the video? That's all I see.
Yeah. Kevin's not in the video. Give me one
That's
second.
good. That's really
Hurry up, get that video up there. For I do my 2-minute comedy set on the mayor's new mustache.
Oh no.
Now, that'll be hilarious. I think that'll be funny. You don't like that stash? You went straight back to the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
A few more things
Please,
with you.
give me one
January 6th
second. It's
pardons
still-
President
There-
Trump.
There's
still
something
loading
going
here.
on there. There's a story behind it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, give me a second while it loads up here, and then we'll play it. And it just speaks.
Hey, what's up, guys? Here I am in
To me,
Target, my
some
local
of the
Target, right? Check
ridiculous-
this out. We're in the boys section, guys. Boys clothes section. I want to show you over here. This is the clothing we have for boys. Dinosaurs are cool, right? There's a big rainbow behind the dinosaur. We're not going to stop there. We got a cloud, hula hooping with a rainbow. What's this? Trucks are cool, right? Picking up a rainbow. Why are we picking up a rainbow, guys? Why is this boys clothing today? I'm not done. Like Baby Shark? Bye-bye. There's masculinity. That's what they're doing. They're destroying masculinity. Guys, it's time to stand up against this wokeness. We need to stand up as parents and leaders and fathers. Like and follow for more.
Yeah. It's time to end wokeness. Wokeness in rainbow or T-shirts with rainbows on them. So, I mean, did you guys agree with this, man?
I don't think it was a
or-
wokeness. If I can say, Nathan, again, if I recall, I don't think it's so much of a wokeness as, and actually something that I disagree with this guy. It's kind of saying that we're not making real men or something. That seems to be we're grooming kids or grooming boys. And I think this whole thing about grooming is a lot of crap. Okay. I think it's strictly one of those things. What's the expression in the culture wars where you kind of just like the transgender, you wave it in front to get a lot of people heated up. And who gives a crap if they have boys T-shirts that have rainbows on? If that's what people want to buy, let them buy it. I don't see the point of making a huge social issue out of this.
So here's what I think it is that we're seeing. And I think this is a product of sort of the changing times. Look, let's just face it. Let's just keep it real. To the point of what he's saying, if you are a man around our age, most of us, on this call, he's exactly right. If you would have gone into the young men's, clothing department, you would have seen trucks and monsters and the things that we typically associate with machismo or trying to teach, young boys how to be men. Let's just be real about it. I mean, I didn't grow up playing with unicorns and, rainbows and all that type of stuff. Those were things that were traditionally associated with, girls or women. Let's just keep it real. That is how society has been operating. Now, from what we've seen as, we've started to embrace LGBTQ plus community more and more. And they're having a larger voice, a larger platform, and, perhaps things that this gentleman might feel like is associated with that. You're starting to see more and more of those things prevalent, whether that's on store shelves, TV, what have you, is that products, because you have so many different types and diverse people nowadays, that crossover, that cross boundaries that we didn't cross years ago, stores are starting to reflect that. So now you're seeing this type of product that you wouldn't have seen, 15, 20 years ago in the boys section there now, because, quite honestly, there's some people who are going to be looking for that, over there now. And as you said, might enjoy that, might like that these days. Now, you cannot like that. You cannot like that for your son or whatever. And as a parent, you obviously have that choice. But to suggest that that shouldn't be available to people who might like that or who might want to wear that, I think is resistance to our changing culture and the fact that we're becoming more accepting of, people who do things differently than what we've always traditionally done. But I think there's this sense among some men that masculinity is under the threat of attack. And I'm of the mindset that, you're not, this idea of conversion, somehow or another, that because seeing that on the shelf is going to convert a boy who is a boy into something else, I think is ridiculous. It's no more ridiculous than to think because, I see that. And if I'm not, if I'm not gay or if I'm not transgender, that suddenly that's going to soften me or transform me. I think it's just a ridiculous thought process. Have products available that people want to buy, and if they enjoy it and they want to buy it and they want to dress that way, let them do it. That has zero effect on me or anybody else.
Right.
So,
yeah, what happened to the days of if you like something, you like it. If you don't, it's just not for you, right? We've lost that. If you don't want your son to wear, or if you don't want to wear a T-shirt with a rainbow on it, then just don't wear it. I can't speak for any other man's masculinity, and I've heard masculinity is under attack, but my masculinity is not open for question, and there's no T-shirt in the world that can ever challenge or in any way attack my masculinity. It's firmly intact because it's inside of me. So, this guy is trading on the culture war.
That's the term,
probably
culture wars.
I don't know.
That's what I was.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the size of his social media following, but he's trading.
I want to comment on
I think it's low hanging fruit. I think it's a cheap way of trying to get clicks and to build your platform. And to a little kid, a rainbow is a rainbow. They haven't been socialized to look at these different things and see symbols and make these kind of associations unless there's an adult in their life that's putting that in their head. To a kid, a rainbow is a rainbow. They're not thinking LGBTQ unless they've heard it from an adult. And they're not thinking anything else unless they heard it from an adult, probably in their life, that's putting that into their head. So I'll say it again. Any grown man that looks at this and agrees with him is weak. Your masculinity is under attack, but no one else.
Can I let me speak on this guy? In my opinion,
absolutely, go right ahead.
He is, when we all scream racism all the time, and I'm like, oh man, we need to stop talking about racism. White men like that guy right there burns my gears more than someone crying racism, because of, and when I see these guys like that, it's because the birth rate, white men aren't producing, the white race isn't producing like a 2 something birth rate. It's scientifically impossible for them to catch up. So this is their way to, in my opinion, to increase the birth rate. If they attack say wokeness and LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff, all they want to do is create more white babies. And these guys write legislation. They do all this kind of stuff to drive their agenda. And every time I see some stuff like that guy in that clip that you just showed, I see racism, white supremacy, saying, oh, if my son or something like this sees it, but two things can be right at the same time, because I do believe that masculinity is under attack. For the single mother, single mother homes, kids being raised without the fathers in the homes. But I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying that has been the majority of the black family. 2 out of 3 black men were raised without their father, which further puts black men in positions to be emasculated, in my opinion.
But that's black men emasculated. If you want to use that as an analogy, Tarris, then that's black men emasculating black men. If you are a black man and you have a son and you're concerned about it on any level about his masculinity, then be there.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying with the single mother phenomenon that happened, and I can see black men stepping up and being a part of their children's lives more so ever. I don't know any deadbeat black men dads right now in my life. I don't know too many of them. I know men that are stepping up, being in their kids' lives, and they're doing those things, but those things aren't. So specifically with my platform, I'm doing a group called Project 1099. I've said that a bunch of times, that is specifically geared for young men, that teach them how to tie a tie, change a tire, balance a checkbook. Men, and I got backlash the other day. Someone
Did you
said,
teach me how to change a tire? I never learned.
I got backlash from a woman the other day saying, well, women need this as well. And I said to her, I said, we're identifying a need in young men right now that need strong men to teach them things that women cannot teach them. And I said to this lady, I said, there's probably going to be kids that go through this program that have never been taught tough to by a man. Never said, sit down, shut up, get that off, get. Mommy, and in our bylaws, the first mother that comes to us and says anything about how we're disciplining their child while we have them for that hour, their kid's out the group. So I agree there can be two things at the same time. When I see that man, I see white supremacy. That's my whenever y'all call racism. I see when a straight white man starts attacking and saying, oh, they're trying to push this agenda. In my mind, I'm like, they're concerned about the birth rate, so they want more white babies being born. It's impossible. It's going to happen. And then on the other side, we need to start making more strong men.
Here's the thing that I think is ridiculous, but I think it plays into this insane mentality that we have. Look, if you are a male, if you are a heterosexual male, then that's what you are. And I don't care how many t-shirts with unicorns or rainbows you put on there. That is not going to convert me into being something that I'm not. And this notion that somehow or another, because you got t-shirts with unicorns on it, is going to make little boys into little girls or soften them in some way, shape, or form, I think is just absolutely ridiculous. And it plays into this sort of negative stereotype that people want to apply to the LGBTQ community, that somehow or another they can infect you and make you into something that you are not. And I just think that's ridiculous. And first of all, again, societally, we have established that rainbows and unicorns are not masculine. I mean, what if I happen to be super masculine, but I happen to really like rainbows? So you're gonna tell me that I'm soft because I like a rainbow?
Hey,
Killer
Cameron. I thought that Cameron killed all of that with the whole pink movement, right?
It used to be that. Like, you could not. This shirt I got on today, man. If you were to wear like these colors at a certain point in our history, you would have been looked at as, oh, come on, bro. I don't know. You got that salmon on. That ain't really too masculine.
Kevin, I just want to say, I've always thought he was
That's not pink. That's salmon.
Okay. All right. So don't worry.
Kevin, that's
don't
not
worry
pink.
about the shirt. You're a GQ kind of guy.
Hey, my bro said this is not pink. This is salmon.
Magenta. It's magenta.
He's being defensive. Can I add something to what Kevin just said?
Sure.
I don't necessarily support gay marriage, okay, but it just makes me puke when I hear people who are using from the so-called Christian right saying gay marriage is hurting the family. What do you mean it's hurting the family? Right. If you're a good father, a good mother, why is it hurting the family? I mean, I could see
the birth rate.
I could see being against it for various reasons, biblical and otherwise. But this stuff about or transgender, it's hurting the family. No, it's not hurting the family. That to me is just a lot of crap. So I just want to kind of point that out.
I agree with you. And you see a common thread. So it's like we got to remove these certain books from public classrooms because if kids read them, well, they might be woke. And you can't wear a rainbow because if you wear a rainbow, that might turn your son into your boy. And you can't have transgenders in the bathroom because they're in the bathroom. Well, that might make the other kids a transgender. I'm like, huh? Like the idea that you're going to be infected by proximity is absolutely ridiculous. And I'll say it again. If you're a man, you're a man. How is a t-shirt or a certain color going to change who you are inside? I can't speak for someone else, but it's not even fathomable for me. I don't think about that. My son is 9. If he wanted to wear a t-shirt with a rainbow on it and a unicorn, that's on you. Go right ahead. It's not going to change who he is, and I'm not going to get all caught up about it because I know who he is. He's my son. Until he decides to be something different. And if he does, that's on him.
But I think that's the fear that a lot of parents have. And to me, it comes back to parenting, to this whole notion. You know, if you're a parent, if you're there for your son, if you're a father and you're concerned about your man being manly or being masculine or whatever, you know, then model in the right way what you want that to reflect. And if your son gravitates toward it, he's going to gravitate towards it. And if he don't, then he's telling you who he is and what he's about. And then you gotta accept that. Same with the daughter. But I just reject this notion that people at their core transform into something that they're not, especially kids.
One of the phoniest things I hear, people, they say, "Oh, the family's under attack," or the other one is, "Oh, Christianity is under attack." Oh, really? Try running for office and say you're an atheist and see if you ever get elected. I mean, these are culture wars. These are just expressions that divide people. I'm a Christ follower, but I'm not going to say I'm not. Why? Because some person has a different lifestyle. My faith is under attack. Give me a break.
The birth rate is under attack. The birth rate is under attack.
Religiously speaking, Christianity is under attack because we live in the world. We live in a sinful world, so to speak, as Christians. So Christianity is always under attack. It's under attack every day, in a variety of different ways. If you want to break it down to that simplistic compound, but I'm not going to get on my theological dissertation about Christianity or religion being under attack. But if we're going to keep it real, it's under attack every day by all of us.
If that's a different point that I'm making, I think you understand. I'm talking about when politicians.
I got you, Phil.
Got me. You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I'm kind of
poking fun a little bit. Or a talking point.
Yeah, I'm poking fun a little bit. The last thing I want to say on this, unless others have other things to say, is this notion of I heard somebody say something about this LGBTQ agenda getting pushed on the culture. And when I hear people say that, I often think back to a time when Black people were not represented on television, in media, in the workforce. And when things started changing, I imagine there were a whole bunch of people who were saying, man, they're really pushing this Black agenda on us right now. Look at all these Black TV shows that are coming out of the woodwork. And every time I turn around, there's a Black actor on this show. Or when I walk into McDonald's, you got all these Black people, who are in here, managing now. They used to be on fries, so anytime she's in a Calvin. Anytime you have a group that has been relegated to the shadows and they begin to have agency and they become more a part of the culture, it is in your face because it hasn't been that way. And now they're exercising the freedoms and the rights that they've long been denied. And I look at that in much the same way. You can, if you believe in this great democracy that we are a part of, that we are all allowed to be who we want to be and pursue happiness as long as we're not hurting anybody, then who am I to deny somebody the right to see themselves represented, to see clothes that they might want to wear on the store shelves, or to not be represented in media to a degree that's satisfaction? Because, I know my ancestors experienced that very same thing. So this notion of pushing the agenda, it's not about pushing the agenda. It's about folks who have been in the shadows saying, hey, we coming for what we haven't been able to get, and that's where it's at. And the resistance is always going to be in the dominant culture to have to adjust to these new cultural norms. I don't have to agree with your lifestyle to say that you're entitled to your right to have it and to your right to be represented. That's what America is all about. I can disagree with you all day, but
by the way, the only time
agree with your right to be who you are.
Speaking of being under attack, the only time I ever feel under attack is on this podcast. That's it.
Kevin, you need to turn in your Republican card, man. I just got to say that. You need.
Oh, don't start that Kevin Gordon. Don't give me that. You want me to? don't ask me to respond to that again. I'm the true Republican. I'm the true conservative. Okay, I'm a law and
We're
order
gonna take
guy.
a poll.
I believe that the people who attack the Capitol need to go to jail. I'm a law and order guy. I'm a pro-police guy. I believe those cops that got beat up deserve some justice, and so forth. So look, I'll put I'm a Ronald Reagan guy that believes in standing up to dictatorship. So I'll put my conservative Republican credentials up against anybody. True ones.
I like that. I like that. I like that you can stand
We're
on
gonna
that.
have our first hot mic poll. Is Phil Heimlich a real Republican? And we'll
You're
see.
going and you will get Democrat.
I did not give
put the D
anyone
beside his
permission
name
to
now.
take a poll about me. I did not give permission.
We can put it on the YouTube channel.
They'll put
Mike Podcast
you'll have a
HQ.
D beside your name so fast, man. You're talking with a straight Democrat.
I mean, if you say you're a Republican, you're a Republican as far as I'm concerned.
There's a thing called Rhino.
Self-identification.
You know how I know
Republican in name only.
In fact, I'm a card-carrying Republican, and I mean that literally and figuratively.
I don't doubt it.
You know how I know Phil's
I
a
don't doubt it.
Republican? Because despite how much I like Phil, I wouldn't vote for him. That's how I know he's.
I'll tell you. Let me
see. And y'all give me a hard time about Kamala. Y'all give me a hard time, and y'all are just as bad.
Kevin, all I can say to you is, you giveth and you taketh away.
I'm just messing with you. Phil might get my vote.
I know
Phil
that,
might get my vote.
Oh, that's big of you. That's very generous. Thank you.
Right now, Phil, listen, no. I'm just be honest with you. But anything is possible. Anything is possible. Interesting. I've got some other topics, but we might save those for another day. I mean, one about Inauguration Day. We can talk about that on Friday. So I'll just open it up before we end. Is there anything that was said that you didn't get a chance to respond to? Was there a point you didn't get a chance to make? You got an issue with somebody? Speak now.
The betting guy saying not to teach a tie, that's mad corny. I love it. I really appreciate that comment, because back when I first got sober, I started doing these little videos and taking my phone and doing like that. And one of my buddies, he said, "You're so corny." So you know what I did? I created a business with my son called Corny Kids Clothing. KKK, Corny Kids Clothing. And it's incorporated now. And it's been incorporated for about 4 or 5 years. So yeah, it's mad corny to teach them kids how to tie a tie. And I guarantee you in 5 years from now, give me a month, give me a year after my kids come out of this 1099 program, after I teach them how to tie a tie, you bring me any kid you got, and they'll run circles around them intellectually, financially, athletically, you name it. Put all the leads on it. These 1099 kids are going to come out cornier in the mug, but they're going to be good kids going forward. That's all I got to say.
Hey, and here's what I would say. Here's what I would say on that comment. First of all, hats off to you, Tarris, for doing that. And that comment about tying a tie, being mad corny, and throwing a jab is better. I would say a good young man ought to learn how to be both. You ought to learn how to tie a tie. You ought to learn how to throw a jab, because there are times where you're gonna have to be suited and booted and conduct yourself in the right situations, and there are gonna be other times where you're gonna have to man up and handle your business. And so it's not one or the other; it's both.
Mm-hmm. Here, I'll ditto that. I'll rubber stamp that. Anything else, Phil? Seems like something.
No, all I'd say is, Kevin, you can tell me offline, but I would like to know where you got that shirt or sweater, because I think I may want to pick one up.
No swagger jacking. Y'all take too much of our stuff, man. Y'all can't have our swag now.
Oh.
Hey man, there was a great debate going on in the chat section about what color this actually was. So
magenta. It's magenta.
Magenta. If on the next podcast you pop up with a salmon sweater, it's gonna be hilarious.
Phil, we'll go shopping, man. Let's make it a date.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
We'll go out.
I never shop without somebody who has good taste with me, because
Absolutely.
The thing about
After that, I'll expand your knowledge of the black restaurant scene in Cincinnati. We'll go get some soul food.
Well, I'll take you up on that. But let me just say, the thing about me is, when it comes to clothes and things like that, is I have no taste, but I know it.
Okay,
that's a good point. That's a good point.
I think
self-awareness is key.
Self-awareness, yeah.
Well, just to give people a heads up, we're planning to be back with you on Friday at 1 p.m. We got some crew members who haven't been with us for a while who'll be with us on Friday. So hopefully we will have another very passionate discussion about the hot topic. So I really appreciate everybody's time, to the panel, to the crew. I appreciate you. To the audience, please like and share this. Tell people about this podcast. This is something different for the Cincinnati market. So if you know someone who's in the podcast or shows or debate shows, tell them about it. Tell them about the podcast and recommend us, please. You can always, to the people following us on Facebook, I'd really like you to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. We're at almost 100 subscribers now. I think we're at 93 before the show, which I'm super excited about. You can find us at Hot Mic Podcast HQ, as in headquarters. All right. So to the crew, thank you so much.
Can I give a shout out to my high school baseball coach? He just came.
Sure.
My high school baseball coach, Ron Ortiz.
Yeah.
He used to tell me I couldn't bat like Eric Davis, but getting them base hits like Eric Davis.
Right.
Ortiz, I'll see you, man. Appreciate you for checking in with
Hey,
me.
at least you didn't throw like Mark Mallory. You know what I'm saying?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh, okay, that's what we're doing.
That's good.
All right. Listen, and to the audience, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. And we'll be with you again on Friday at 1 p.m. Have a great day.
Peace out, fellas.
All right, guys.